Okay, so I think the first thing I just want to kind of share with you guys from my perspective is just a huge amount of appreciation and gratitude for the work that you guys have put in to help with the season. I say this a lot, and I don't know if you guys, I don't know how you receive it, but from my perspective, like this is not a thing that I can do on my own. I'm not capable of, as you guys probably know, I'm not capable of putting together this type of mod list that works with all these interactions. And if there's custom config tweaks and stuff that we need to make, that is not my wheelhouse. That is incredibly overwhelming to me. So for the fact that you guys kind of take that on and do that in your free time to help me with the channel and making these videos, like I owe you guys such a debt of gratitude. It's nothing that I can thank you for enough. And I just really, really appreciate the help that you guys have given me, and the passion that you guys have for this is insane. It's literally, you guys realize that, like, you're all crazy. You're all insane. Like, you guys have kept XCOM alive. The people in this room and other people that are creating mods have given this game significant legs beyond when it should have legs. And it's pretty cool. So I just wanted to say that before we started as a thanks to you guys. So yeah, really, really cool. And thanks for being part of the videos and the community, and working with me to make these seasons, because it literally wouldn't happen if you guys weren't here. So pretty cool stuff. Looking at the document, does everybody have access to the document that Fear put together? Rusty, I know you just came in, so I don't know if you've seen this yet. Do you have access to it? I'll put it in the group chat for this voice call.
It's pinned in the production team spoilers. Pinned in production team spoilers.
Yeah, I see 7 people in there besides me, so that looks like about everybody.
Yeah, we should be good.
Yeah.
Need to go and get the parental password.
What's that?
At least,
I can't open Google. I need
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say, should we at least put those notes from the doc into the chat where you're typing right now, Odd?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Wait, where's the chat? How do I pull out the chat? Oh, I see.
Top right, if you're on desktop, top right has a show chat button. Hey, Cloysta.
Hey.
Thanks for joining.
I'm on my phone, so...
Oh, that's totally cool. Thanks for making the time. We were kind of just about to dive into the document, so... Yeah.
I haven't even looked at it, so I must admit I'm on time. I had 10 hours worth of streaming yesterday, so...
Oh, nice. Yeah, no worries. If you can pull up the doc, then that's great, but it's also in the side chat of the voice channel now, so...
Yeah, I just dropped it into the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start out with the first thing. The general goals for season 8 and 9. I know we're kind of combining those two seasons. One was not that great, mainly my own fault. But season 9 was way better from a lot of different perspectives.
So I would like to point out that season 8, you got screwed over by the dark event that increased force level.
I know.
That one dark event completely boned you.
Oh yeah, it was a little heavy-handed. I'm pretty sure that Reshi has since adjusted that dark event to be less insane.
Yes. But you were actually handling it very well. If that force level increase had only been a +1, but the fact that you got hit by like a +2 or +3 is what really got you at the end, because you were making it work in season 8.
Yeah.
And
that, and the fact that for some reason we just hadn't picked up on it in previous seasons, but CI makes the resource alien alloys very scarce. Like I remember that was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So that was it. It was a good learning. Like season 8, and actually, if I'm being totally transparent here, I think it's good to have a season fail from time to time.
Great to see you fail.
Well, yeah, like
I definitely gave us the itch to want to do it again.
That's it, and I think it's like if you go into every season being like, well, it's just a foregone conclusion that it's going to be a success, then it's like the whole thing about XCOM is the stakes, right? And if there's no stakes, what's the point? So I think it was good.
Another reason to include Season 8 and Season 9 together is from a mod-based perspective. I know that we definitely, as a producer team, took Season 8's core list and then expanded it to make Season 9. So Season 9 really could also be considered more like, an 8.5 or an 8++ if you wanted, because we really took kind of the core from 8 to grow it into 9.
Yeah, it was almost like 8 was kind of like a testing bench for a real season, because we threw so much stuff into there with, admittedly, there's only so much you can test these things. Because at least from my perspective, season. Go ahead. Sorry.
I've seen 8 was a real season. I've seen other other content creators who love to kind of follow along with your seasons because your influence is that spread. Other content producers pick up Season 8 and they're able to get it to success, to completion.
Yeah.
So Season 8 was still a valid, usable season.
Yeah.
It just happened that
people
it kicked Odd's butt.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
There were people in the Discord as well that managed to complete a Season 8 season with the Season 8 mod list. So it was just literally you got screwed over by a number of factors all merging together.
Yeah, and if looking back and analyzing decisions, kind of knowing what the outcome was going to be, there's definitely a lot of different choices that I could have made as a player to smooth that out and maybe have it be a bit more successful. I'm grateful that it didn't work out, because Season 9 for me was just so much more enjoyable with all the tweaks that we made. It was a lot more fun. Like, I remember some of the, after that force level increase in 8, you could probably sense a lot of frustration where it was like, this just is impossible. I have to just leave this mission or whatever. It just felt that kind of sucks the fun out of it, right? And then from a viewer's perspective, I think if I'm feeling frustrated, it's obviously not that great of a vibe to watch or enjoy. So,
well, yeah. After having watched multiple content producers in XCOM, I have come to realize that if the person playing the game is having fun and enjoying themselves, that positivity and that positive energy transfers into the video content that they're creating using XCOM as the medium.
Yeah.
So if the producer is having fun, or the content creator is having fun, then the people watching the video are going to enjoy it.
100%. And I think for me, I toss this around a lot where it's like, when we come up and have discussions about different ideas, I'm like always coming back to, sure, it might not be balanced, but it's fun. And there has to be some type of, forgive me for using the same word again, but balance between fun and overpoweredness and challenge and all that kind of stuff. And I actually think, if we look at, I don't know what the final stats were. I might ask Wolfson for this, but I don't know how many deaths we had, but I feel like it's more than almost any campaign that we've ever had.
Yeah, it was. It ended up at 28 total deaths, which was the most ever. Mm-hmm. Although, as somebody pointed out when I posted the final stats, the death rate was actually pretty slow. That had the season been any closer to a typical length, it would have been maybe only 19 or 20 or so, because there was never any big squad wipe. The most you ever had was, I think, 2 deaths on a single mission. That only happened a couple of times relatively late.
Yeah. And admittedly, I was hoping for a little bit of a Game of Thrones situation there, because that's always it's fun. Like, I think it's a good turning point in a campaign.
There were a couple missions, especially there near the end of the game, where you got your heart going a little, because there was one mission that you did where you had a couple deaths there was a legate that walked up and just blew away, and you had 2 people die in the first or second turn of real combat.
Yeah.
And then that had you on the edge of, wait, is this going to turn into the squad wipe?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, is this the one? You know, that's fun though. That's fun.
At least one squad wipe. Yeah, sorry. I was expecting at least one squad wipe. I'm surprised that you didn't manage to get one.
I emotionally felt like they happened all the time, just from my perspective.
Yeah,
because like
the fact that Odd is skilled enough to claw back out of a potential squad wipe like that is a lot of the reason why I know I personally enjoy watching his material.
Oh, thanks, man. I think those are the most fun situations in XCOM, right? When you go down and you're like, okay, well, let's try. It's like a puzzle. That's how I treat the game. And if I don't succeed a lot, but when we do, it's fun. So I think the challenge that was presented, my entire point here is the challenge that was presented was appropriate for a viewership that likes to see a challenge, doesn't want to see a steamroll, but also doesn't want to see something where it's like every mission's 3 hours of analyzing and that gets a little bit tedious in my opinion. It's not fun for me. So I think it was pretty solid. And I think for the goals that we set out for in season 9, very, very, very much hit them.
Well, since you mentioned those goals, I don't know if let's go ahead and kind of speak about them so people listening can kind of follow along with what our ideas were, because we knew going into this you were starting with an enemy within run.
Yep.
So you were going to do XCOM 1, just enjoy it, and then as soon as you got that done, we were going to then pick up into an XCOM 2.
Mm-hmm.
So the production team, we had a lot of talks about, well, what do we do in XCOM 2? And the goals that we kind of ended up settling on were trying to carry over some of the flavor from Enemy Within. So that was stuff like the Mec Troopers and Gene mods. PEXIM is similar to the psionics structure for the original Enemy Within. I know there are other overhauls that try to emulate that a little bit more faithfully.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were talking about, okay, well, what class? So then we decided that Amalgamation had never really been done by you before. You've done a lot of proficiency, a lot of standalone classes. So we're like, well, Amalgamation's cool. So we gave it a try. Season 8, we went with basically just kind of the core Amalgamation with 1 or 2 plugins. But then after seeing that in Season 8, I think we realized that Amalgamation, while it's a very fun way to play classes, probably won't see much Oddcom play in the future. So for Season 9, we definitely opened the gates wide open. We're like, well, if we're going to do this, let's just basically throw almost all of it at the wall, see where it takes us. So that leads into some of the Amalgamation discussions from later.
Amalgamation itself is a pretty weird class pack mod.
Exactly.
Most class pack mods work with a small, condensed list of stable classes. Amalgamation works better the more you throw into it. The more random it is, and the more class option choices there are, the better it actually runs.
Yeah. And then the last big thing that we had for this that was a showcase was Reshi's Requiem Legion.
Yeah.
Because it was such a really cool conceptuated enemy pack that was designed, because XCOM 2 is infamous for what we call the inverse difficulty curve, meaning it's really, really hard at the start. The middle ground is a difficult but fun. And then once you get to the late game, it's basically just raffle stomping everything as you're running to end the game.
Yeah.
So Reshi designed her Requiem Legion to try and combat that. And of course, it was a learning curve because this was one of the first major play tests of the Requiem Legion. So we'll talk more about the Requiem Legion. We have it there.
In its current state.
The other nice thing with the Requiem Legion is Reshi has managed to bring back and reintroduce a lot of the XCOM EU enemies.
Yes.
So that really helped dovetail nicely with that kind of EU and XCOM 2 theme for the season.
Yeah. And to Rusty's point, that required custom modeling. It required custom animations. It was a lot of work that she put into to make it work.
It's
worked well.
Sorry, say that again, Claysta.
Requiem Legion is a work of art.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's special, and I think I can't picture playing a campaign without it. That's where I'm at on it. Like late game, those enemies need to be there. They need to, those like the legates and the mechapeds, like those need to be there.
And let's say, can everyone agree that the sound effects that Reshi chose for the altars are amazing?
Oh yeah, so good. Yeah, I kind of forgot about the altars. Actually, those were also really unique. I mean, everyone that she had in there was great.
Yeah, the thing about Requiem Legion is that it's not just like your powerhouses, like your legates and whatever. You have like interesting units that do interesting things, like your altars, your Nivens, and stuff like that. There's a lot of like really unique and interesting mechanics that you do not see in other enemy mods. That's like a big part of why Requiem's so special.
Yeah,
okay,
I've been playing with Requiem since it was fairly early in development on my streams, and every time she introduced a new enemy, it'd be like, Reshi, what have you done now?
Yeah.
Hey, Kex is trying to jump in.
Yeah, what I was gonna add was that, I mean, taking into consideration that pretty much since the ending of season 7, and we were planning, kind of like just like daydreaming of, okay, so what could a potential season 8 look like? Like we already kind of had in the back of our brains, like, yeah, we want Reshi, we want Amalgamation. And seeing the results of both season 8 and season 9, honestly, we're going to talk in depth about it later, but with the power that came with from Amalgamation to Xcom side, I can't picture a campaign without Reshi's mod where it wouldn't be a complete stomp. Like there's no other, and like you could subscribe to every single other enemy mod in the workshop and not Reshi's, and I still think Amalgamation would overpower those enemies. So that speaks, I think, very loudly to the finesse and the brilliance of Reshi's design, and not just being bullet sponges, but having very interesting dynamics. They're going to change the way you play. You have to think about not only what classes do I bring, what perks do I need, what ammo do I need, do I bring this, do I bring that? I think that's it's brilliantly designed.
Yeah, absolutely. And what
but you have to think.
There were times in the season where I was thinking, like, because we were killing things so quickly, I was thinking, what if we had Beta Strike or something like that on, where the health pools are like doubled or whatever amount, right? So you can't just like Alpha Strike it, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that
Beta Strike it. Really,
so we actually have some discussion points for later around kind of the Advent balance and that kind of stuff. So to kind of get us a little bit back on topic so that we're not kind of bouncing around everywhere.
Yeah.
I think the next kind of big bullet point is I want to apologize to Nay and Kex and say sorry for the suggestions that we made of allowing for 7 armors with Iridar's appearance manager.
Oh, man.
Also including unvetted customization packs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Kex.
I was watching the producer thing, for like season 7, and there was a part where it's like some like Otter Kex where like we were talking about like the uniforms and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, like next time, like we'd be open for trying out more uniforms and stuff like that. And I was watching that, and I was thinking, oh, if only you guys knew.
Yeah, I've watched the season 7 ending podcast as well multiple times. Before I dive into the entire submission process of these paired seasons, just as a last thing from the previous point, Odd, would you be like were you satisfied with Enemy Within in terms of like moving forward? Do you think you would like to also kind of have that prelude of Enemy Within, or probably maybe just stick to XCOM 2 moving forward?
I really enjoyed having some of that stuff sprinkled in there. specifically, I think the Mech Trooper stuff, the way that that's handled, is really, really enjoyable. Having the gene modifications were cool, although, and I don't know if we have a separate point on this specifically. There's some stuff within the gene modifications for just overall balance and giving, you know, a lot of really good options for choices instead of like a handful that could have smoothed out the gene modding process a little bit to get more people in there. But I felt like the Mech Troopers were in a really good spot. Contrary to previous seasons, like Toaster era, where you'd have like your one mech dude that goes around and just punches everything, can never die, is like unstoppable. That was not the case here. And part of that was because of the Requiem units, and they had specific strengths. Some of those units, I think the Mechapeds had strengths against Mech Troopers or Spark type units. So like stuff like that, I think kept them in a really good place. They didn't scale too crazy. There was good trade-offs with them all the time. Yeah, so I thought that like the theming for Within from that perspective was pretty solid, and something I would definitely prefer having in my XCOM 2 campaigns. Does that answer your question?
So to Kex's question, would you do a XCOM 1 into XCOM 2, or just play XCOM 1 just as a standalone for funsies? Or are you primarily going to stick around with XCOM 2?
Oh, is that what you're... Okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
I think basically for Season 10, are we doing XCOM 2 with some Enemy Within type mods, or do we also want to do Enemy Within campaign?
Got it.
And then jump into X2?
Yeah, I would say...
Season 10 is going to be XCOM 3. We've all got the inside scoop on that.
God, I would love nothing more, dude. I would love nothing more. Trust me. I think for the next season, I don't think we would go through a full 10-month XCOM thing on the channel. I just think it's too alienating for, you know, half of the subscribers type of thing. That being said, my kind of position of what to play on the channel is generally like, what am I going to enjoy the most? And let's hope everybody else also enjoys that. XCOM will never go away, but I do think that the XCOM Enemy Within into XCOM 2 probably felt like a lot for most viewers. But just to give you a very clear answer, Season 10, I would prefer just XCOM 2, using some of the XCOM Within flavorings that we did, and quite frankly, using a lot of the things that we used in Season 10, but we could talk about that, in Season 9, but we can talk about that maybe a little bit more later on.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So going back to like the soldier submission stuff, Kex, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely. And unfortunately, Nia, I don't think is going to be able to join us. I sent her a message, but she just didn't reply.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's busy she has two like really young kids. And stuff, so we did discuss this thoroughly.
Oh, I'm sure.
The entire process. And I'll be the first to admit on that Season 7 podcast, after seeing what the process was like, I was like, yeah, sure, bring it on. I will do all 7 armors. That was a mistake, but not just because, as dumb as it sounds, 7 is more than 3. There were other components that made the process difficult. Namely, we added cosmetics, big packs that added a lot of stuff. And the more items that you have, the longer it takes for the list to load. Each category, like each time you open just like right arm, it takes a minute. You open up thigh decos, takes another minute. That just alone, it adds. It starts adding up. It starts adding up.
Can I ask you, Kex?
Yeah.
Would you be able to just give people a brief overview of what your process is like for one soldier, and if you can, kind of estimate the number of minutes that it takes you for each of the steps?
Yes, right on. Okay, so basically, people start posting their submissions thankfully we had Filestro and I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting. There were
Kaz.
two friends and Cats that made a bot,
Yep.
so that they could at the very least check for file size, stuff like that, just to see red flags, and it really helped for people to realize that they were making their submissions with mistakes. But basically, once the submission is correct in terms of file size, naming conventions, etc., we grab the files and we dump them into our own games. We're subscribed, both Nia and myself, we're subscribed to the entire cosmetic list and some of the gameplay elements that we know we're going to want and need, like for example, Exalt, stuff like that has influence over cosmetics. And then what we do is, I mean, we have like different processes, but what I do is I immediately go into the information tab just to see if there is a bio. If there is a bio, and then I just immediately check the voice pack, which was a new addition, just to see if it was consistent. Then I go into the different armor looks. What we have to do, unfortunately, because we didn't find the need to do this for season 6 or 7. But we definitely needed to do this for season 8 and 9. Well, for season 8 was because of the mods that we didn't vet that we added. They had huge gaps. They were not friendly with other cosmetic packs. So we had huge gaps, huge clipping issues, stuff like that. And the problem is some of those were kind of hidden. Like you had to rotate the soldier. You had to check different attitudes because, sometimes they'll with one attitude they'll raise an arm or they'll bend their torso forward, something that allows us to see how many gaps there are, if there are still gaps and stuff like that. And obviously we don't allow gaps, we don't allow any egregious clipping. So for each time that happens, we had to send that submission back, inform the submitter, hey, your soldier has clipping. Depending on our time and availability and obviously mood, we can go in depth with even pictures and saying, look here, if you go into this attitude, in this armor, the right arm with the torso has a gap. Sometimes we'll just, we can't be that efficient, and we just say, your soldier has a lot of gaps, just please revise it again. For some submissions, that resulted in people having to resubmit the same soldier on average 3 times.
Yeah.
So I take it that's an attitude change per armor per soldier.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly it.
Per armor, per soldier, per submitter, and each check taking you roughly at like 10 to 15 minutes per time.
Yeah, sometimes even maybe even 20. And like you said, because it's 7 different looks, so you have to check the 7 different looks, check attitudes for all the 7 different looks. Sometimes, depending on how you created your soldier, like if you didn't quote unquote create the armors in order, the voice would be like consistent in 4, but the last 3 armors would be a different voice pack, and that also a reason to send it back. So It was like it was insane the amount, and it just incredibly quick. Like last season, we checked something, I don't know the numbers, but it was something like around 700, 800 submissions, and I never at any point throughout the process, maybe the last day, did I start kind of feeling the exhaustion, the burnout. With this season, we both started feeling it immediately. Like within the first 5 days, we were like, what the hell is going on? It was just, and not that this is a fault, but the success of season 7, but specifically the success of the video you made of season 7, explaining how it works, and in season 7 being such a success rate in terms of the submissions having few mistakes, that encouraged a lot of new people to join in. And also the Enemy Within campaign. Mm-hmm. The Enemy Within campaign, so many people watched that campaign and they were like, oh my God, I love this. I want more. I need more. Odd is the man. Let's do it. This is the time to jump in. So we had a lot of new people that weren't completely aware of how the process works or how even the game works. So that compounded so much, and yeah, it was just it was a lot. It was definitely a lot of work. That to the point where by the time season 8 was failing, I think we still weren't done.
Yeah, definitely you weren't done.
Yeah.
Though I would like to be the very first one to tell everybody that Kex, you and Nee, the way you guys did your work, the work that the two of you did vetting all those submissions, all of the submissions were Rockstar submissions in Season 8 and Season 9.
Yep.
The creativity of the community was still amazing, and we loved the work that the two of you did to make sure that creativity transferred into the actual campaign. So thank you.
Even on the soldiers that weren't featured in Odd's campaign, but other Discord followers and users have like brought up, the entire season pool collection was amazing. That's both on you, Kex and Ye, vetting those soldiers, but also massive thanks to everyone that submitted soldiers. Like the soldier pool wouldn't be possible without all the viewers, basically.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, thank you guys for the kind words. Yeah, it is a lot of work, but it's very gratifying because, like Odd said at the beginning, right? We every one of us has a huge passion for the game, for Odd and the way he plays, his style, his gameplay, and we love the submissions and we love the creativity of the community and how they can express it through visuals, through voice packs, through specific changes. I love all that. It's a lot of work. But like I still want to talk to Nia. Definitely moving forward. Obviously, we haven't discussed anything we need to discuss internally.
That's okay. You can. I think this would be good to discuss what your thoughts are for next season.
Okay, me. This is just me speaking personally. I can't speak for Nia or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Rusty has put an insane and inordinate amount of work on unrestricted customization Redux, making it less invasive, more user-friendly, more compatible with more mods, etc. I am still I think that the community would benefit more, or they would have more of a creative outlet if we kept Iridar's appearance manager, just reduced it from 7 armors to the basic 3. But the counterpoint is that with unrestricted customization, yes, it will be one look throughout the entire campaign, but you can combine even like the power behind it. You can even do even more stuff. Rusty, maybe this is like a good time to kind of like plug in the changes that you've made from the base UC to the UC Redux version that you made that so many people love.
So UC Redux takes the base UC formula, improves it a lot, gets rid of a lot of the back-end bloatware, streamlines a lot of that process. But one of the nice things in the UC Redux is component filtering. It has text filter on it, so you can easily search through all the cosmetics. It makes creating a soldier a lot easier and faster.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely up there to for something to consider. And obviously, I think that both Nia and myself would appreciate just the fact that it's just like one outfit that we would need to vet. But yeah.
That's probably the only downside with using unrestricted customization is it is the one soldier appearance throughout the entire campaign, and it doesn't matter what armor they've got on. Like you could be wearing the berserker suit, you'll still look like how how the character is designed rather than being put in berserker meat suit. And that's probably its singular kind of drawback is you don't get that visual armor progression, which you can get from using Iridar's Appearance Manager.
That's the one downside for UCR that really kind of hesitates me really going to back behind that.
I think the only other thing that I would point out with UCR is if someone creates a character using UC or UCR, the character's appearance and visuals are pretty much kind of locked into having UCR. And if someone submits a character that they created using UCR, and you try and use that character in a non-UCR game, the character self-implodes the moment you try and change any visuals. And by self-implode, I mean like you'll just lose the torso cosmetics, the arms, legs, like will become something else. Things will stretch and warp in weird places.
Yeah, I personally feel like soldier. uniform progression is really important. I think having that visual distinction between each tier of the armor feels really good, and it's exciting to see what people have chosen for their next looks. I personally like, having that Berserker suit and it just gets applied. It doesn't have to do anything crazy. But I like, again, having that visual representation. For somebody like me, the way that I play, I see the suit. I'm like, okay, I've got the abilities of the suit. If I don't see that, I'll probably forget. So that's like another bit of a knock against it.
Part of the made visual cues. And then I think the last thing we should touch on for cosmetics is we haven't really talked about voice packs.
Yeah.
Were they a success? Were they not? Did we like the repetition of certain unique voice packs?
Some of them were very successful.
I'm a bad man.
Daddy like.
Daddy like.
Yeah.
That's the
Some
best.
voices are just so iconic that when you have multiple of them, like say the Monosax, like I think that's the singing one, right? It's like, especially if they're on the same mission, it's just kind of jarring to hear like a bunch of singing and stuff like that, right? But even besides the voice packs that are used, there was plenty of voice packs in the mod list that just were not used by, I think, anybody, such as like the Ghostbusters ones. I don't think anybody used those.
Yeah.
And another thing about the voice packs, this is more so a me problem, I guess, but like sometimes the audio quality between like the filters and stuff, it's like it's not super apparent. It's like kind of subtle, but it kind of bothers me when there's, for example, Halo Reach stuff is maybe a little bit louder than like the base game in terms of like volume and stuff like that. And it's just like it kind of bothers me for like audio mixing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think I'm in the camp of for this specific topic with voice packs, more variety the better. It definitely bloats the file size of the mod list, so that could be a consideration for some. But personally, more variety in there the better. And I think if we have more options that we all approve, then you get into fewer scenarios where people are picking the same voice pack.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah, I think that the voice packs were a huge win.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire campaign, we never saw any performance issues or stuttering or
Nope.
anything. Not even when we were loading the characters for vetting. They never presented themselves as issues. And I agree with you in terms of the more variety, the better. Obviously, any voice pack that we would want to continue to add for the future, we would vet for quality, sampling, volume, curse words, etc. But yeah, the more variety, I think, the better.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah.
Voice packs bring a lot to the game in terms of flavor and style.
So to close that out, for voice packs, I think we're all in agreement that it's adding a lot. But to Deadput's points, there's some quality control stuff that we can do a better job of in vetting and saying, like, is this something we really want in there? If people pick this, is this going to get annoying to hear all the time?
Exalt voice pack.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, sorry for the quick interruption.
No.
I think Nie might be able to jump in for a few minutes.
Sure, bring her in.
So I mean, yeah, we could continue, and if she can jump in, because we're like now just discussing her bread and butter. So it'd be
exactly. If she jumps in, we'll
circle
revisit
back.
these topics, get her opinions, and
yeah. If it's good for you guys, let's move on to the next topic. I think what I'll try to do is if we spend like maybe 10 minutes on each of these topics as a whole, I'll try to drop some like 2-minute warnings in the chat, and that way it'll just kind of keep us on task to go through all this. Because if we don't have like an ideal
If we don't have a
closing time, we can talk about each of these for an hour. So.
We'll end up doing another season 7's 30-minute podcast that turned into 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
record, we're aiming for the 60 to 90-minute mark on this one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cloister, we didn't hear what you said there.
I said I've got about 10 minutes before dinner's ready, so I'm going to have to drop out completely shortly.
No problem, dude. Okay, let's move on to campaign length. We've got overall campaign length, the mod list, playtesting, viewer burnout, and bonus production goodies. We kind of touched a little bit on this earlier when Kex was asking about burnout, and I said that I personally didn't feel burnt out. And I feel like viewers were very engaged until around episode 90. And that's when we started to see viewership drop off a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because nobody's making 150 episode series anymore. You just don't do that. This is how you kill your channel. So in case anyone's curious. But I think definitely the campaign we could all agree was too long. We definitely.
But individual episodes, though, were pretty much where we were aiming to put them.
That is correct.
Your combat was quick. It was engaging. Your runtimes, even on heavy lost missions, were at about that hour 15 at most zone. So I think overall, the individual missions were in a pretty good spot. We just ran into some stuff we're going to talk about in the next couple blocks that caused the overall episode count bloat.
Exactly.
I think our point of note with campaign length is season 9's length being the 150, 60 episodes it was pretty good, pretty long.
Yeah.
But a lot of viewerships have also watched back to back as much as it was created. The season 8, 29, 30 episodes, and back to back in their creation, the 90 odd episodes for the EU run. Like the entire campaign length goes to me from the start of the EU run all the way to the conclusion of season 9, and that was a year and a half ish worth.
10 months.
10 months. 10 months.
10 months.
What was it? 10 months? Okay. Yeah, they're not as bad as I thought it was, but it was a long run time.
It was, for sure. I think we're all 100% in agreement that that's too long for a campaign. And there's reasons in here that we'll talk about that led to that, and I think we can clean that up a little bit. I think ideally you're in the 70 range for a full campaign. I think that would be perfect. I don't know if that's totally achievable with Covert Infiltration, which we could talk about later too, but that is something that is nice. I just want to stop and welcome Nee. Thanks for being able to join us. How are things going with you?
Oh, hi. It's good.
Good. We had just talked about the soldier submissions and cosmetics and stuff. Kex shared a lot of your shared feelings about just how much time it takes to go through and vet every soldier and 7 uniforms. And we were expressing a lot of gratitude for the work that you guys have put in. And I do think that viewers and submitters genuinely do understand how much work it takes for you guys to put this stuff together. So just to reiterate from earlier, like, thank you guys for the work that you did with all the soldiers. The quality of the soldiers this season obviously starts with the submission, but then you guys going through that refinement process is so huge to make sure that the best quality soldiers get added to the pools. It's like it makes the campaigns really memorable when you can think about the standout soldiers in each of those, and a lot of that comes back to the work that you guys did. So thank you for that. Nee, did you? I know you're probably not here for the full session, but is there anything that you wanted to talk about or share with people that are related to the soldier submissions and cosmetics that you think would be helpful, or something you want to share, or just anything? Kind of an open floor to you.
Well, I can say we kind of burned ourselves out yet again.
Yeah.
Because it is quite a project. As well, especially when you factor in life and everything, work. So I don't know. Of course, having less uniforms is definitely gonna be a thing that I'm gonna make sure happens.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
7 was way too much.
Yeah, I think would you guys agree that 3 was kind of the sweet spot? Like you just give your main armor tiers and everything else is a uniform?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, yeah. And also, I said this to Kex, and I'm going to say it to you since you're here. I wanted to apologize from the rest of the producer team for throwing in unvetted cosmetic packs that caused all the heartache for you all, and that was shoddy preparation on our part.
Yeah.
With how impactful some of those cosmetic packs were to the work you guys were doing.
Well, shit happens. I mean, it's impossible to not have things fall through the cracks, of course, but I think it's just.
But the end results you guys
that we can, do better for next time.
Yeah, but the end results you guys actually ended up with were amazing.
Yeah,
so.
It was really, really impressive.
Some of the best soldiers that has been seen in any campaign.
Yeah, agreed.
Some really memorable units as well. Like,
is there anything? And I know you just came in here, but is there anything that you can think of that you want to add to this, or do you want to move on to other topics? Nee, I'll let you kind of close off the soldier submission and cosmetics if there's anything else that was on your mind that you think is worth discussing.
Of course, I came in just after that whole thing.
Yeah.
Nothing specific I can think of on the spot, of course.
Okay. If you do, feel free, and we can cycle back. That's not a problem. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's jump back into the campaign length.
So I think kind of we can bridge off of the discussion we were just having around throwing cosmetic packs that were unvetted. One of the concepts we talked about was trying to look at potentially playtesting for a mod list. So when we're building these mod lists, we didn't actually have a finalized we're starting day one mod list until literally the day Odd was booting up the campaign to start recording episode 1.
Yeah.
So what kind of thoughts do you have around the volatility of building a mod list and trying to get playtesting? I know we had Nee and Shire MCT were helping us with trying to do some of the initial playtesting, which, of course, didn't help that the Tweaks mod was getting changed all the flipping time on them.
Yeah.
What kind of thoughts do you have around kind of a production schedule for finalizing a mod list going into a playtesting phase to iron out some of the bigger hurdles?
It's
and then going into recording.
Yeah, it's challenging for a lot of obvious reasons, but I think what I think the casual viewer might be like, well, why don't you just play through the whole campaign and then kind of adjust things? And it's like, well, for reasons, because life and then burnout, and if you're just playing the same thing back to back, and it's like, it's not that
well. And the campaign you just finished was a 170-hour campaign.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not super realistic from that perspective. Go ahead, Rusty, if you want to say.
No, sorry, I'll let you finish first.
Okay. I will say that what would be ideal is if we planned to start a campaign, let's say October 1st, and we have by September 15th the final tested mod list. So there's like 2 weeks where it's like literally everything's locked in. That would be ideal. Is that realistic? Possibly.
Nope.
I think some of the stuff that would help, and this is something that a few viewers had volunteered, specifically on the Discord, some of the more active members, they would be willing to dive in and play test full mod lists for us and provide feedback so that we could get a better understanding of what's working and what's not from multiple sources. And I think that would help a lot, specifically too, if they would be willing to maybe even share a save file so that they're like, okay, we're at 2 months into a campaign. Here's where we're at. And people could pick up from there and then test mid-game stuff, test some late-game stuff. Like, I think that would be pretty helpful. But again, that's adding work to people's lives.
I was just going to throw in the fact that for the most general kind of casual viewer, they probably don't even realize that the mod list does indeed go through a testing and vetting process before being seen. Most people probably don't realize like the amount of work from all of us as the production team before the first video even goes live.
Yeah, it's insane. That's a good point.
We're constantly thinking. We're already thinking about season 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great. That's a great point.
Also, to follow along with what Rusty was saying, we started the season at like 530 some odd mods, and we ended the season at 555.
Yeah.
And so removals and additions in between.
Yeah, as we found things through the course of playing, the list was a living artifact.
Yeah,
it really was.
I think that's pretty unavoidable. Like and I'm okay with that. I think it's fine that it will adapt to certain things or change slightly throughout the season. Just because that's the nature of running all of these different mods and these weird interactions. And if I know one of the things that Reshi would highlight is different, status effects that were operating in certain ways that were not expected, depending on the type of soldier or unit and the enemies that were involved. So there's a lot of tricky little interactions there that, even if we do a fully thorough testing phase with multiple people, there's still going to be things that we need to adjust throughout a campaign.
And it's really similar.
Oh, sorry, Wolfson.
I mean, it's a really similar thing to kind of what we were discussing about the cosmetic stuff a few minutes ago, that just simply with each additional thing, all the number of permutations and interactions of this mod pack and that mod pack just skyrockets, and it's going to be virtually impossible to, catch and stomp on all the bugs.
Yeah.
Leading on from that, I think something that I think we should note pretty nicely for this season with 500 plus mods, other than the save file bloat issue, I don't think I recall any serious crash.
Yeah, that's huge. Great point.
And I think we should possibly just congratulate ourselves a little bit here for a 500 plus mod list.
Oh, agreed.
Run into hundreds of issues.
Yeah, because I would say in every previous season, there was at least one, probably two, maybe three moments where it was like, hey, dudes, I can't even load the game right now. Like, nothing's working. And it's like it's panic time, right? And everyone's in there trying to figure it out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And even sort of the lesser level of it that I kind of noticed, because when I'm doing the stats, those points where it crashes and you basically have to go back a turn, and so I have to cross out a whole turn's worth of stuff. Even that maybe happened probably not even 10 times over this entire length of the campaign. So that was a really good track record.
Yeah, no, this list is really stable. So it looks like the last item is bonus production goodies. So, Odd, I know you put a lot of effort into Season 7 doing a bunch of extra goodies.
Mm-hmm.
Did you miss them? Did you like not having to do it?
Yes. So in Season 7,
what kind of fuss do you have around that?
Yeah, in Season 7, we introduced stat updates from Fleet and Wolfson. And personally, I loved that. I thought that was super cool. I think generally viewership liked that as well. We didn't do that very much in Season 8 and 9, but that is something I would consider returning to. I think the challenge with that is mixing my unpredictable recording schedule with the availability of Fleet and Wolfson, who are doing this detailed stat tracking, to make providing stat updates more relevant instead of talking about something that happened, 7 to 8 episodes ago. And that's just a challenge.
I would definitely agree on that. That when we were doing the stat update stuff and everything, or trivia questions that were for that current season, that was always the thing that, by the time an episode airs and I can watch it, get the data, write the update, and then by that point you've maybe recorded 4 or 5 episodes already. At some points, the stuff I would give you to put in an episode would be a week behind by the time it made it in.
Yeah, and that's unavoidable. It's nobody's fault. Yeah. It's just the nature of how recording this stuff works, because there's always other games that I got to be covering and stuff too. So yeah, that's an unavoidable one, but I still think we could come up with some creative ways to inject more of that. I think what we did ditch completely was the trivia, and while a fun idea for season 7, it just doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of people watching something for entertainment and having the trivia stuff. I think was fun, but whatever.
I think it was a bit weird to not hear XCOM logs for an Oddcom season, but it also wasn't particularly missed. Like the replacement for the leaked commander comms worked really well.
Yeah,
that I think was a great idea.
Oh, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Live environment not recorded.
Say that again, sorry?
Yes.
I said the whole trivia works better in a live environment not recorded.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Deadput, you were saying something?
As a member of the writer server, RP server.
Yep.
That's been around for like several years. Anyways, for the log section, for the logs part, this season was like pretty dry. There's like pretty much no actual role playing going on.
Yep.
Part of this is because the season was so long, right? But it's like I mean we got some new writers in the server and they made some really good work. But still, it was like, as somebody who's been there since season 3, it was like weirdly.
So without the potential thrill of Odd being able to read a given log, you lose some of the integration of that role playing into the season.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is that there might not been much to draw on for log stuff this season.
I think that's
fair. It was
fair.
a bad luck of the draw that since we wanted to start season 9, immediately we reused season 8 soldier list, the character pool, and we just had, in a very funny, almost ironic kind of way, season 9 pulled like 0 writers, 0 people from the RP server.
Yeah.
So that was also like kind of like a bad luck draw. But just to kind of wrap up this section, I wanted to ask Nia specifically, but anybody obviously can jump in, because Nia was with Shire, part of the 2 people that were helping us with playtesting that campaign. Do you guys think that, like you were saying, adding people, volunteers to kind of play test could help? Because you were saying, I mean, obviously real life is an issue, but some of these people, their entire lives is XCOM. So, I mean, maybe we could find somebody that can actually help us. We're like, would that be help, or would that be like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of scenario?
No, I think it will definitely help. And I think it's specific to playtesting. There's, I think, a handful of people that have volunteered that who I know play through the mod lists, and I think that would go a long way if we have a mod list a month in advance that they can try for a couple of weeks and give us some pretty tailored feedback. I think would be great. So I don't see any downside in that.
Yeah,
cool.
Like, I really like that part, that I could like test a little bit of the mod list in between all the cool stuff, because everyone needs a break, and I did find quite a few bugs that were ironed out in time. It's just the issue that we didn't have enough time that I could like reasonably get to like late game.
Exactly.
Or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. Just to circle back to finish off the bonus production goodies stuff. So the trivia we won't continue with. The memes I think are great. I know a lot of people in the comments talk about the memes. The meme channel is very active. It's super fun. It creates like some memorable moments. So I think
that's a staple.
And it's viewer submitted too, so it's great. Like it's way for people to get involved, right? And I love that.
I think probably the last point for production goodies is we should give the shout out and honourable mention to Fleet Admiral J for maintaining the Oddcom video databank.
Yep.
XCOM databank, because he's not here to voice for himself.
Yep. Great shout. I think the stats, like I know that the stats don't get a ton of direct call out attention from me, but I know when it's posted in the Discord and you see it in the comments, like people are engaging with that stuff, and the people that like stats are going to look for it, and it's fun. So if you guys are down to keep doing it, I think that's great.
So one more topic that we didn't actually put on there that occurred to me as we were talking. Odd, what were your thoughts around the changes that you made to video consumption for these seasons? Because you introduced that for the YouTube membership, they get early access to whatever videos that you have made available, versus the traditional viewer who has to wait until the scheduled time.
Yep.
What kind of impact did you see? Because I actually noticed that in like season 7, it felt like there was a larger amount of excitement when an episode dropped in like the general discussion, versus seasons 8 and 9. There started out with a little bit of that excitement of people posting the link and being like, the video's here, let's talk about it, because it seemed like it shifted all behind the YouTube paywall versus being in kind of the general. So what were your thoughts around kind of that segregation of availability?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think first of all, it's all been positive from what I'm seeing. I see we have a dedicated early viewers channel on the Discord, and as soon as those videos would get scheduled to go live, people are already discussing and talking about it. I think when people come to the comment section on a video that's newly posted, if they're not a member, then they can see some discussion in there already. And for some people, it's like, yeah, great. If I want to, I can participate in that. But if you're not missing out on any content at all for not being a member. And that's really important to me. I don't want people feeling like they have to become a member to get something that other people are not going to get. It's just that for people that are members, they get to see it when I have it scheduled. If we had no memberships on the channel, then nobody would know any different. All those videos are scheduled. If I have a batch of 5 of them, for example, those videos are scheduled to go out sequentially every day, and it's no change at all. And so it was just a way to give something back to people that are supporting the channel monetarily. So I think it's generally been very positive in that regard, as finally a decent way to reward people that are supporting the channel financially without impacting people that are just watching without supporting financially. So I'm good for it.
As a kind of a follow-up with that, I know, YouTube membership versus, say, Patreon membership.
Yep.
What kind of thoughts do you have around kind of the disparity of the fact that you do have Patreon members who don't necessarily will be getting that benefit because they're not going through YouTube?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging one, right? Because there's an obvious integration when you're a YouTube member, that I can do things through YouTube that I can't do through Patreon. And I wish that there was a better integration there, that there's some, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on how it all works, but as a high level thing, when people are supporting on Patreon, more of that goes to the creator. When you're supporting on YouTube, Google takes a much more significant portion of that amount for their own desires. So from that perspective, it always makes sense to support your creator either, directly through like a donation or PayPal type thing. Second would be Patreon. Third would be YouTube. But for me, I'm okay taking less of a financial gain if somebody's going through the YouTube way, but has a much better reward for the person wanting to do that with the early viewership and stuff that's tied in directly to the platform. So I hope that kind of helps answer that.
It's a bit of a weird question. It's gonna.
But I felt like it was something that we should discuss in this, so people listening.
Not campaign specific, and more kind of how to run your YouTube channel specific. Like, yeah, it's a
no, and it's okay.
Since we were talking about production pieces, that's the only reason I even brought it up.
Yeah. I think it's great, and one of the things that I am happy that we did is we introduced a YouTube tier for the soldier submissions as well, because historically that's only been Patreon. So
yeah, I was gonna say that you also have the Patreon people have the submissions and the exalt, so they also get perks.
Yep, it's true. I think it's in a pretty good spot, and I wouldn't make too many changes to that going forward. But yeah, it's a good question.
Weird to admit that sometimes I just go and watch the Set the Vibe video because I like it.
Yeah, sure. There you go. That's funny. Just for the last thing for production stuff is we did introduce this season sharing the save files, and I think there was some early excitement around that, but it totally died off, and almost nobody, once we stopped uploading save files, like almost nobody asked about it. Like, it was just not a thing that got the uptick that I was hoping people would that it would kind of garner. That being said, like, it's not a lot of work for me to upload them, and I've shared some directly with people that have reached out and asked, hey, I'd like to try this mission. Specifically, like Leviathan came up a few times. I'd like to try that, whatever. So I don't think that's something that we would do in future seasons, but I think the big takeaways from this season were keep the memes. The leaked comms were a little bit divisive early on, but I kind of got better at choosing which clips to leak, because I think early on I was maybe a bit spoiler heavy, whereas later on I kind of got into the groove of finding something that was engaging, that people would kind of be like, oh, okay, well, we got to see what happens with that. But we're giving away the entire twist if there was one.
I think for me, the leaked comms definitely helps from the point of Oddcom normally came out when I was about to sit down to eat dinner. So I would start the video and then, get my plate, get comfortable, start eating. And basically that would be, engagement at the point of leaked comms finishing. But like that's happening as I'm getting settled in to watch the video as well. And I assume that that's the same for a lot of other people who are watching. That first 5 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes of I can't think of the right words.
Like the squad management stuff?
Yeah, like getting settled in to watch the video. It's like the trailer in a cinema.
That's actually a good point, because I did want to ask your guys' opinion on something. Towards the end of the season, once the save file bloat was getting really high, like there was a lot of times where I just wouldn't be able to load anything from the geoscape. So we started making those in-mission saves at the start as backups, and that was way more reliable. But there's another really huge benefit of that, just from my perspective, is like loading the game, launching the game itself, even on a high-end computer, takes a long-ass time. But loading a save takes a suspiciously long time as well, except if it was at the start of a mission, it was like almost instantaneously. So from a production standpoint, I actually really would love to move to the point where we start in the mission and it's easier to like jump into that action. We would still have the leaked comms at the beginning. I think I could still do a brief squad overview of who's in there, but maybe not to the level of detail that we had in the squad management starts. And then
I think the big thing about squad management was people watching with bated breath to see if you caught that you hadn't equipped the right armor on people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, ideally I just don't make any of those mistakes, but unfortunately I am human and one of the slower humans.
I cut like the last big chunk of the campaign, and when you were exactly doing this process, and I thought actually that kind of worked even better in terms of if you're one of those viewers that are like extremely engaged and invested in what's happening, it's sort of kind of like a good cliffhanger to end an episode with, okay, these are the 6 that I've picked, this is how I've kitted them out, good luck, see you on the next one. And then you start the next episode already in the mission. I think that's a good kind of way to keep the audience, kind of like salivating a little bit with like I want a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely. I mean, that's a good way to move forward.
What I was gonna say is that I think it helps with the pacing if you start at the beginning. Like you shave off maybe like a couple of minutes, and it just keeps the episode like just a little bit shorter.
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't remove the squad management section because I personally really enjoy hearing the thoughts on how and why you're loading out the people.
Yeah,
No, I did like whenever it was getting to be a longer episode, you did the cut.
Yeah,
that was always nice, to have the kind of the brevity of, okay, this is what I came up with, and then as you're going it over, you're like, oh wait, why did I make that decision?
Yeah,
and then you make changes on the fly.
Yeah, and I think that's a good.
It was a shorter combat showing the full thing was also cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to mix in there because if I'm doing it every time, it gets a little bit monotonous, especially when it's a similar kind of squad loadout to previous missions. But I certainly understand that it's like there's so many items with this mod list. There's so many things to consider that it could just be very tedious, and I'm trying to get better at making it a little bit more succinct to respect people's time. So,
all right. So speaking of times, I think this is pretty good there. If anybody has anything else, they can jump in for one last thought. But campaign length, the next things on the docket were around Covert Infiltration and dark event chains and the scaling dark events. And what our thoughts are around how that impacted campaign length. So for the folks at home who weren't aware, this season we had a mod called Scaling Dark Events installed that, based upon the number of pips that was present on the avatar progress, more dark events would actually scale to threaten odd. The repercussion of more dark events spawning is we did not take into account how Covert Infiltration handles dark event countering, and the fact that it's 2 missions that it spawns on the geoscape for doing combat missions per dark event. So what ended up happening is Odd had some months where he counters 6 dark events, doing 12 missions in the span of about 3 in-month days.
Yeah.
I think the issue here is it's more down to what the dark events actually are, because obviously they're all huge things that need to be countered. So you take on all of those missions. I think if the dark event pool itself had some, I don't mind about that one, and just let it go, like a lot of more kind of the lower filler things, and they just kind of let through.
That's a good point, Rusty. And I think what I would add to that is that if we did have more quote unquote filler dark events that don't seem super impressive on the surface, it does kind of, it could work out to this death by 1,000 cuts mentality of like, oh, okay, yeah, but now these guys have these tiny little mobility boosts, but then they also have aim boosts. And now like it could kind of start to build.
I actually don't agree with going the direction of the small things, because you just counter the big stuff, and then sure you got a bunch of little stuff, but like a lot of that little stuff they're not terribly interesting.
But that's kind of my point is that yes, while they're not interesting on the surface, in combination with a bunch of other things that might be active, they could stack up to be more impactful than we think. And one thing I would like to propose, talking about these dark events, is your guys' thoughts on the dark events from Requiem Legion, where it's like, oh, this is going to last for 2 months or 3 months, versus the standard dark events that are all just 1 month in time. Because I actually felt that in the late game of season 9, one of the main reasons for doing the dark events was, like the dark events were scary in some circumstances, but also I needed to get promotions on my soldiers. And I feel like having this discussion around the number of dark events and what type they are, we also do need to consider soldier progression, because people need to go on missions.
We actually have that as a discussion when we get down to soldier classes, because the Brigadier rank threw everything kind of off there. So I
also feel like XP gain was probably a little slow. We could talk about that. We could talk about that later, I guess. But
yeah,
I think.
Go ahead, Wolf.
Sorry, say it. Yeah.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think kind of two things that this ties into. Number one, when we had talked about sort of the campaign length and issues of viewer versus player burnout, I think maybe some of that did come from, I guess, the density of missions because of the dark events. The fact that we could sometimes the campaign could go 5, 6, 7 episodes, and that would be only about 3 weeks of in-game time. That maybe sometime for some people contributed to the thought of, oh, when are things going to progress a bit?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think almost the situation that you were in sort of within the last stretch of the campaign, where every month the dark events come up and you're going, okay, this one's no big deal, this one's no big deal, okay, here's the couple that I really want to deal with.
Yeah.
I think that was a pretty good place because some of them were actually going through and you were having to prioritize.
Agreed, yeah.
And also
fill out that dark event list with some of the lesser dark events.
And also part of the problem that we were running into as well is we overtuned the crew size, because I think one of the big things Covert Infiltration did right was having a smaller crew size limit to force you as a player to not counter all of the dark event, because Zymanek, I believe, referred to it as a distraction at one point.
Yeah.
And that really is kind of what it is.
Go ahead, Rusty.
Then we end up with, actually getting less submitters into the game with a smaller crew size. So
and that's a great point. I think
that is the other side of that coin. You are absolutely right.
Yeah. So the question is, and this would be good for people if people are watching this and you've made it this far, I would be curious to hear, would you rather your soldiers show up and maybe take on a couple of missions, or they turn into the Covert Infiltration bot? Because there's always a couple, right? Or the Covert Action bots, right? It's just how it is. I mean, that's XCOM. But would you rather them show up and be part of the campaign in that way? Or would you rather them not show up at all because our squad size is a lot smaller in limit? So,
but in that same vein as well, at the end of the season, you had a roster of about 20 to 24 soldiers that were doing your primary deployment rotation.
Yep.
Which meant that even though we had 70 people in the barracks, you were only sending, upwards of a third of those people actively on missions.
Yeah.
Which meant you had this giant suite of captain rank soldiers that were basically just sitting there doing neither covert operations nor active missions. Which then the other piece about the crew size is, by having the larger crew size, it alleviates any kind of pressure that would be put upon your barracks.
Yep.
It allows you to do all those missions.
There's a really good mod that I think I would definitely suggest for a season 10. It's by Lord Abeezy. It's called Never Again. And it brings, funnily enough, the darkest dungeon concept of people not being able to do things repeatedly into XCOM 2. And what this basically means is that if your soldiers go out and do one of the COF special missions that are outlined in that mod, they can't go and do that type of mission again. This meaning that for assaulting the 3 chosen strongholds, you will need 3 different squads, and I think that would be very useful for getting more viewer submissions into the rotation for a season.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think we also, if we do step back and look at this season, I would say that there's been more viewer submitted soldiers involved across missions as a whole compared to any previous season. Partly because of length, partly because of the mod list, partly because of gaining experience. One of the biggest things,
because of soldier deaths.
Yeah, true, right? Partly because, and even late game, like you have a soldier that you lose a major, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's a huge setback, and that's going to artificially add to the campaign length as well, because now I got to develop a new guy.
Guild.
Yeah.
Well, if we want to talk about salty about unit deaths, the singular mock execution for the entire season.
Yeah, who was that? Who did we singularly execute?
Rusty's submission.
Sorry, man.
I want to mention something.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to mention something, and just a quick question, Wilson. If you have the data, when date-wise did the campaign end? Was it like June 2036, or like how long? Do we know?
I don't keep track. Hang on 1 second. I can pull up Leviathan while we're talking.
The reason I asked that question is because I play a very different style of XCOM than the vast majority of people, but I still think it's a valid a point that I'm going to bring in. I see a lot of people mention. I play with a version of hazardous wounds that's called very difficult or very mean or very hard wound types.
July 17th, 2036.
July. Okay, so we're basically like a in game, like a year and a half. And what I see a lot of people complain about the harsher wound times that I use is they say, "Oh, my soldier is out for 54 days. Might as well fire them and hire someone new." And to me, that just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Because for starters, once you get the infirmary, that cuts down by half. And throughout season 6, 7, 8, and 9 that we've been using non-harsher wound times, I still see egregious wounds in mission that result in 5 days out, 6 days out. And part of the reason why some of these top-tier soldiers that could be in the infirmary for 24 days, 20 days, 18 days, that's what, in theory, allows or promotes the idea of soldier rotation. So if we're still getting colonels and brigadiers getting almost blasted to death in mission, but that only results in 5 days wounded, that's why we're still seeing only 24 out of 70 people going out repeatedly.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
One specific point I did want to make along those lines, and I think a couple of us chatted about it in the channel, is it just has always irked me a little bit, the fact that the wound timer kind of overrides the fatigue timer. Like, you'll get somebody whose will gets knocked all the way down into the red, but because they got a slight wound, then that 2-day wound timer, their will resets back into the green. So you get this weird situation. One person gets their will knocked way down into the red, they're out for a month. Another person gets their will knocked into the red and slightly wounded, but they're back in 3 days.
I think there's a mod to fix that.
Yeah, I know people said there were some mods that deal with that.
Yeah. Deadman, I think you were trying to jump in.
Oh yeah, I think there was a mod this season where it's like your wound timers decrease with med kit heals. So I think that at least for this season.
No, that wasn't a mod. That was actually a perk. There was a perk that reduced it if you still had an active med kit left.
My entire point with this entire discussion, sorry, Rusty, you'll go next, is just the fact that in my campaigns, I have around 50 soldiers in my barracks, around 50 to somewhere between 50 and 60. And because of these harsh, and as well, I finished my campaigns about a year and a half, a little bit more in game time. So it's like a very similar ecosystem. And all of my 50 soldiers get healthy rotations, and they all get high ranks, and they see a lot of missions. That's why I think that being out for 24 days, or at the beginning being out for 54 days, one, it puts that pressure on you of, I gotta get the infirmary up and running now, or I gotta meet the Templars now so that I can scan for faster healing times. It doesn't prolong the campaign length. It doesn't make your high tier soldiers obsolete if they're not gonna miss out on like they're not going to fall behind 2 ranks or not even 1 rank if they're out 20 or 30 days. And it promotes healthy barracks rotation. I really think we should give that one a try.
Yeah, I definitely think that like maybe the barrack size was actually good enough at 70. The issue was the rotation still wasn't quite there. And maybe readjusting the wound timers would make the rotation there.
Yeah, I think two things on that. I think from my perspective as like as a player, some of that is on me and the choices that I make to allow for variety and stuff. And then the other thing was specifically once we got to that mid to late game, running into units like the Legate, the Altar, the Mechapede, where it took me like a lot of time to really figure out those enemies. And I was like, I need to have the best dudes on this mission all the time, or else I'm going to get wiped here. And then it's a bigger setback.
There's some more rotation right there.
Well, sure. Yeah, sure.
If you get wiped, that'll increase the rotation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like from a viewer's perspective, the question is a lot of the times, well, why don't you just load some missions, practice against this Legate and the Mechapede or whatever? I just feel like that isn't in the spirit of XCOM, if that makes sense. I feel like it's we're trying to learn this thing as we go live. I don't know. So
yeah, agreed.
Moving into a season 10 with the Requiem units, which are 99% certain will keep them around.
Yep.
You now know those units
yep.
and know the limitations, so you can be like, okay, I can handle this Legate.
Exactly.
5 mid-rank soldiers with this 6th person taking the lead. Like,
yeah, agreed. Another part of the rotation issue is that because of some of the amalgamation perk trees being so strong in comparison to others, it was almost like, well, I'm shooting myself in the foot if I'm not bringing Oskira Daddy on every mission. Like she's...
Yeah, that's true.
Like it's kind of... Why would I bring somebody that has half the capabilities when she's like this killing machine? So there's just stuff like that to balance. And from a production standpoint, some of that is just on me trying to be balanced. But certainly, yes, in the last third of the campaign, I was heavily reliant on that top 25%. Like there's no question. But I think from an involvement standpoint across the board, I think it's probably the best it's been. With staying within the nature of what XCOM is, right? You generally have your top squads and you're gonna use them.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Wilson.
Just to lend some perspective on what the rotation was like, I was looking through my spreadsheets. So a total of 89 soldiers got on at least one mission this season. Okay. So 89 total. Out of those, 40 of them had 10 or more missions. The top, I think, was 34. Askiradad and Old Man had 34. But 40 soldiers had at least 10 missions. And then beyond that, there was another 10 or 12 that the only reason they had fewer missions was they died relatively early on, but they were big, important soldiers during that time. Yeah. Ronin, White Wolf, a couple more like that. So over 50 of those almost 90 soldiers, I would say, were pretty significant contributors.
Yeah, which I think that's great, and that's very validating information. One of the things
we're definitely improving on the rotation from season to season. I think that's an aspect that we are certainly improving upon.
Yeah, and it's not perfect, but I think we can get there for sure. One thing I would like to see more of is like we had some soldiers that really felt like specialists, and that was super cool. I can think of Wolfson as a great, Warwolf as a great example, where he got that perk with the smoke because he was in that smoker class. He had the perk that granted, I think it was called Sacred Incense, and he was the perfect counter to the Warlock. And I would look to bring him on very specific missions. And then he also got like the dense smoke thing where they couldn't get crit, and that was countering some specific Requiem units. Like that was fun to have people that fit more of a niche that weren't perfect all around, but on certain missions just looked like necessities. That was fun. And if we had more of that, I think would be exciting.
So talking about... Good choice. So go ahead, Deadput. I'm going to segue this after.
I was going to quickly say that out of the final Leviathan squad, Warwolf was probably maybe the biggest surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise to have him on the final mission.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a plan for him, and it just kind of didn't really come to fruition where he was super necessary just because of how strong we were. And I didn't know what we were going to run into in the last room. So I was expecting that we would see Mechapeds, Legates, Alt. Like I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to pop out here. And then we had like 75 honor guards, and I was like, oh, okay, well we could have had different people here, but hey, whatever. You live and learn. And he was there, but in a way, like, you know, I'm kind of glad that he was there because he neutralized some of our power creep a little bit, because he wasn't like as strong offensively as everybody else.
Good soldier. That last room, I think he got lucky with the honor guards, to be honest. It should have been Requiem.
Yeah.
See, I've heard different things on that, so I'm not sure.
CX unit that did take over the list there, the honor guards probably being the most fitting unit to have.
I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So talking about missions, kind of moving us forward a little bit. So combat itself. This season we ran the infiltration mod, which meant your timers were frozen until you broke concealment. I know we originally, whenever we were talking about EW callbacks, and within callbacks, we actually played with the Tactical Legacy Concealment mod for some simple initial play testing. So having played camp a little bit with all three options of the traditional X2, where the timer is running, but you have squad concealment, versus infiltration, where the timer isn't running, allowing you to kind of set up perfect ambushes while concealed before the timer starts kicking in, versus tactical legacy concealment, where timers are just running at all times, but you start with no squad concealment, only individual concealment. What do you feel like that had an impact, or what kind of flavors do you feel work best for X2 for you? Because it did make a significant impact to the way you played, because your Overwatch game was significantly more pronounced this season.
Yeah, well,
that was Amalgamation, though.
Yeah, so I think that specific point about, we can talk about the Overwatch thing. That's because of that Sentinel tree. That Sentinel tree was
but even without Sentinel, the timer pressure with infiltration did not seem quite as significant either.
Yeah. So that's fair. Couple of things. I think thematically, a timer starting while your entire team is ambushed doesn't totally make sense. I feel like when everybody's concealed, that timer being paused is like, okay, like they don't even know we're here. Why would there be any pressure to get out of this? So I like that from that perspective. Were the timers in the right spot? Like, were we too lenient with timers? Maybe, but I can also think of quite a few missions where it was down to one turn left, or I didn't even realize the timer was going and I totally failed a mission. I felt like when there's two things. Yes, it removed some of that time pressure, but that didn't alleviate the pressure to succeed against every wave, in my opinion. Like, especially once you were dealing with heavier, scarier Requiem units, I felt like there were a lot of situations where if that timer was running from the beginning, it would be, I feel like, this could just be my own confirmation bias, but I feel like some of those missions would be quite literally impossible to do within the timer limits while dealing with these heavy Requiem units. Just feels like it would be much more of a challenge.
Possibly.
And that's not a bad thing.
On the subject of timers, it's been used in several seasons now, I think from season 5. The Reality Paradox Temporum, Paul's Timers mod. Your feelings on that, Odd? Enjoyable?
It's great. I feel like when Chosen or Rulers show up, or some of those Requiem units that had it, I feel like that's fantastic. That gives you a little bit of flexibility in there to deal with that unit, and you can manipulate that too. Like, you can keep that unit alive a little bit longer and move your guys closer to the objective. Like, it feels like there's some tactical benefits in there, which keeps it kind of exciting. Welcome back. But on the whole, I'm not looking to make every mission like so intense where it's like you feel like you have no time. Like, I like the setup. I like the push and pull of, I know that if I'm fully concealed and I'm moving towards the objective and I'm not engaging for like 10 or 12 turns, that I'm probably going to end up in a worse spot. Generally, it's better, I find, to just fight the first or second pod that you run into. And like those missions where it was find the field commander or whatever, those were always really stressful because it's really easy to blow your cover once you're deep into the map. If you're fighting at, after being concealed for 10 turns, it's like you're gonna be fighting a ton of units. So I don't know. I felt like it was in a pretty good spot personally, but what do you guys think?
I always run the Reaper card anyway, so yeah, it's pretty much the exact same setup that I normally play with.
Yeah, whenever I get that Reaper card as well, I also keep it on forever. But I agree with you in terms of, I think that for you as a player and for the audience, I think they want the vast majority of mission risk, tension, and drama to come from, are you good enough? Are you smart enough? Are you tactical enough to engage these enemies? Rather than, oh, the clock is going to end the mission prematurely and I'm going to fail. It's good to have that time pressure sprinkled in here and there.
Yep.
Let's say, I don't know, 15 out of 80 missions. I think that's like that to me works.
Yeah, and I would say that we're kind of at that point because there, as I said earlier, there's a whole bunch of missions that I can think of where it came down to one turn and you're like, well, can we make it? Or even better, when we have to use some type of like maybe a psi ability to grant an extra action or something just to nudge somebody in there. Like those are fun moments too.
There were definitely some missions as well where, like, especially on hack device missions, where it was a case of, okay, I need to deal with this enemy, but instead I'm going to rocket blast that wall so that the hacker has line of sight because one time left. And those decisions, those situations make for cool viewing,
Yeah. Reshi, welcome to the chat. Thank you for coming. Timely too, because I think we're very close to getting into specifically some Requiem stuff.
Advent and enemy units are coming up after Gray's Band, so we're going to talk about the Gray's Band and then start talking about enemy units.
We should probably move on to information mods. Personally, I love yet another F1.
Yep.
I actually really enjoy the having.
So would the autopsy variant be better?
Yeah, the autopsy variant, obviously I made that, so I'm gonna promote it.
And just so that we're all on the same page, and so I'll say for my own personal understanding, the autopsy variant would mean that you're not going to get all that information revealed until you've done an autopsy on that unit. Is that correct?
You don't get any.
Yeah.
And it integrates very nicely with UFOpedia.
Exactly.
Yep. That was the other thing I was going to mention. Yep. The UFOpedia takes its cues from the autopsy mod as well, and it also won't reveal the information unless you've done the autopsy. And on that topic, the UFOpedia bestiary itself, how did you feel about that, Odd? Because this was the first season using it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think from an engagement perspective, it's super cool. I think the only downside is that when the enemies introduce Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV variants, and then you get that new journal entry, and it's kind of just like, it's the same thing I would have seen in the F1 page already. I'm not learning any new information there. That's not a problem with the mod. It's just that
it's done because obviously all the stats and everything change variants, but I see what you mean. You shouldn't really be getting that notification that, hey, you've met the stronger version of this enemy now.
Exactly.
So going back to go ahead, Cloista.
I was going to say, although that is useful when the stronger versions have new abilities.
Yes, exactly. It is, yeah.
Yeah, which is relevant with...
but usually I would see that already in the F1 screen, so if you introduce the autopsy version, then we're good.
Talking about the F1 screen there, Odd. if it had been autopsy gated, meaning that the very first time you came across a Mechapede, or the very first time you came across the Legate, or you're looking at the 6 different variants of Taipans, and they're all kind of hidden behind. How do you think that would have impacted your ability to do
more deaths?
Your job.
We would have significantly more deaths, and the campaign would have been 250 episodes long. So
let's not do that, please.
I think that I don't know. I'm just guessing that there would be way more deaths. Like, to be able to go up, like, those Requiem units are so intricate. I'm thinking of like the Legate as an example, the way that it would like tick a status effect, but only if it's taking damage and stuff. Like, I think that some players would be extremely frustrated not being able to at least know about that in advance. But at the same time, like, thematically, it is really cool that you don't know what that enemy does in full until you either experience the action that it's taking, or you get you manage to kill it and get the autopsy.
Yeah, I think definitely with autopsy gated F1, the nice thing there is it is a drag and drop mod.
Yeah.
It can be installed or removed in an ongoing live campaign with very little issues.
You know, it could be a cool idea, Rusty. You know how you've got the bestiary protocol scanning available in mission?
Yeah, tie that into.
That would be cool if you had if you tied that to like a holo targeter or the arc thrower or something, and it had limited, like, let's say it had like 2 charges or something in a mission. And so if you see on your intel screen, I've got an unknown enemy that I'm going to be facing, you got to bring that thing so that you could scan them, and then you get that access to that information in the mission.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Weirdly enough, the bestiary already has that option. So by default, it's set up that you'll get the bestiary the entry on unit's death, but you can actually just turn that off, meaning that the only way to get entries is to use the scanner.
Yeah, and I hear you there, but I think having the limited charges, making it a tool that isn't just I can't just scan everything. I have to pick and choose, or I have to at least equip something that's going to allow me to do that, would be more of a gameplay impact that I think would be more interesting.
The tie-in for like the autopsy gated get another F1 of saying
exactly. That's what
I either do the autopsy or I do the bestiary scan, and if I do either option, then I can unlock the F1.
Yeah, I think that's what Odd's referring to.
Yep.
Because right now the scanning is tied to the bestiary, which means, okay, great, I didn't kill it, but I scanned it. So when I'm back, I can see it. I think what Odd means is there a way to tie the scanning to the F1 being gated by autopsy? So it's like everybody's going to be gated by autopsy, but if I scan them in the mission, the next turn, I suddenly have F1 functionality. That could be really cool.
Definitely possible.
And definitely adds in gameplay implications of having UFOpedia now.
Yeah.
Hello, targeter stocks go up through the roof.
Well, that's it for sure, because they need something, right? Because early holo targeters are great, but halfway through the game, like, adding 10 aim is like, who cares? I'd rather do so. I'd rather
so speaking of
carry a rocket launcher.
Stuff like when you can do the decoy and the conceal and that with it, but
exactly.
So speaking of aim,
hidden.
What did we think about the Graze Band and the aim roll mods? Because previously we had always been using the enemy unknown aim roll mod, but that guy is actually very heavy-handed and does not play nicely with other interoperability of other mods. So this season we decided to go with the Long War of the Chosen aim roll mod, which introduced the Graze Band.
The Long War mod in its back-end functionality is 100% more stable than the EU aim rolls. I would definitely say take it on the next mission. It's a brilliant successor to the EU aim rolls, but 100% turn off the Graze Band. Just 0 Graze Band, no dodge, because
I hate that mechanic. It's so stupid. Yeah.
I tend to agree with you, Rusty. I think the Graze Band provided more frustration than positives, but we definitely benefited from that on the XCOM side as well.
True. True. The only thing I hate with the Grays band is it's not updated information beforehand. So you plan and judge and like, okay, I can take this 70% shot, and you're expecting it to be a 70% shot, and it turns out it's only a 60% shot. But more importantly, it grazed, and rather than dealing 12 damage, you've just done 6, and now the enemy isn't dead, and it's Yeah,
I would be okay with turning off grazes just for a more predictable experience in an unpredictable environment.
I mean, personally, I use the original high hit dodge behavior mod instead of both, and I personally prefer it massively because it just simplifies all the calculations. It's actually better for performance in my experience, and the percent you see is the percent you get.
Yeah. Does anybody have any contrary thoughts to that?
I kind of do.
Yeah.
I think I made a comment about this once. I kind of liked the Grays band and the bit of unpredictability. The other thing about it where I think there's a benefit is, in my mind, one of the things that leads to sort of the late game XCOM power creep is that everybody's got such ridiculously high aim that almost any shot is 100%. Having that Grays band adds one more layer there, in that you really have to either push soldiers' aim that little bit higher, or you have to do that extra little bit of stuff to set up a better shot, flanking or whatever, in order to get not just 100% to hit, but push that Grays band off the table. And I thought that was kind of beneficial.
That's a great point.
In some ways.
That's a great point too, for sure.
I mean, we could just like make it so that soldier aim progression just doesn't get as high as it's been historically known to. Like even on non-snipers, it's been pretty high.
Amalgamation doesn't help that either, because a lot of the primaries really push their aim a lot higher than his.
It's not just that as well. It's also conditioning and stuff like that as well.
Well, yeah, we definitely have
just stat boost, though, because stat boost you can stack ridiculous amounts of aim, whereas conditioning at least only once.
We definitely
still something you have in addition to everything else.
Yeah, and we have
it's a replacement, but it's not an addition, because it replaces the stat boost from covert action, so you can't add 100 aim just to somebody by sticking them on 10 plus 10 aim covert actions.
Yeah, and we will get to that.
It's an addition. Okay.
Sorry,
go ahead, Fear.
We have an entire block talking about super soldiers and stat buffs and stat stacking. It will be a topic. But since we're kind of in the combat zone, and we were talking about kind of the aim rolls against the enemies and the dodge helping enemies survive, now we're kind of getting into the bread and butter of the enemies themselves. So Advent units being kind of weak compared to the power level of the damage output that XCOM had going for it, or the fact that the Requiem Legion, compared to the standard enemies, it felt like only the major powerhouse Requiem units were the only threats to XCOM there near the end, and the Lost was pretty much just cannon fodder.
Yeah, Lost suck.
On there, the Lost is the Lost, and then of course the last two categories of enemy units were Mach X or Exalt, as we branded them, which I want them to be kind of a separate discussion, but then also the Chosen. So, okay, let's open up the floodgates. What do people think about kind of the enemy selection?
The Requiem units definitely 100% were great.
Yeah, I think everyone's in agreement that the Requiem stuff, I'll be using that in every campaign going forward. 100%, there's no question.
Personally, I'm of the opinion, and the last campaign that I played, I throw everything in except for Custodians. Pretty much every enemy mod on the workshop I use, except for Custodians, because those guys have a health point pool in the 90s and are just bullet sponges. And with that enemy variety, trying to balance that, and we talked about this in the last production team video, getting the encounter lists and the balance lists correct is a really difficult process. But when you
it's actually a point where we started without using diverse aliens by force level, which does kind of the pod shuffle, and we were worried that it was actually going to cause more problems than not.
When you do manage to get your enemy encounter lists and your enemy mix and your enemy variety in a good spot, missions feel completely different. You could have one mission against mostly like Frost Legion units and another mission against like Team CX units, and it really diversifies like the play. And that only happens with, the more enemy that you add.
But on that same point, though, Rusty, or what's that? Yeah. On that same point, though, as you start adding in that diversity, if the relative scaling of those enemies don't play nice, you have a whole bunch of units that are basically cannon fodder, and then you have just a small cadre of units that are real threats. And then it turns into, if you don't have those real threats on every mission, then there's kind of, it's just a roll in the hay at that point.
I do kind of see it, and honestly, I feel that's perfectly fine because, to me, in my mind, the bonus that Advent have against XCOM is just sheer quality of numbers. They have so much junk that they can throw at you constantly, that it is a case of most of the time you're just chewing through the cannon fodder.
If I may, can we? I would love to ask Reshi about this for obvious reasons, but Reshi made a comment before saying that I'm just pulling from the document here. Basic enemies need to have more proportional impact and higher spawn rates, while Requiem unit spawn rates should have been tweaked to be lower on the average mission, especially in the case of boss units, not in terms of quantity of enemies, but the proportional health pool. And I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit, Reshi?
Reshi's on no mic, I think.
Yeah, that's okay. We can read the text. The issue therein is fundamentally cannon fodder shouldn't exist. So I guess the idea is that Advent needs to be as strong as
because if you think
Requiem
about
units.
The early game, even your basic trooper, your 3 health, 4 damage trooper, is a threat. They have grenades that can hit multiple units, cause their exposure. One shot from a single trooper, if it crits, can literally kill your enemy in one hit. So once you start taking into account kind of that lethality scale, as you move further down and your soldiers become super soldiers, that lethality scale shifts significantly. And I think that's part of kind of that inverse difficulty curve piece that Requiem Legion was trying to address as well. So having the base enemies getting more impactful then turns into that situation where you won't have a map that's just full of things that you're one-shotting, alpha striking every pod, and you move on with your life and you win.
But that's the thing. Like on in my perspective, like I also play. I've been playing like 3 campaigns in a row with Requiem Legion, Requiem Mutators, and a host of other enemy mods. And to me, in my campaign, the non-Requiem Legion enemies and the vanilla enemies don't lose their threat level. I mean, obviously, yes, it is inferior to Requiem, but I think the thing that is causing such a disparity of threat level of Requiem being the only threats and everything else is cannon fodder. To me, the responsible mod for that is Amalgamation and the amount of toys that we gave XCOM. I play with vanilla classes. I know I'm the weirdo, but the every enemy for me is a threat. Obviously, the gap between the threat level of other modded enemies and Requiem Legion is there, but is not as noticeable because I only have 2 rows of abilities and a third one scattered around. I don't have 5 rows filled with 600 abilities per soldier.
True. I suppose my other balance.
Well, that sounds boring. Just kidding.
I run with typically larger pod sizes of 6 to 8 units per pod.
That too. Yeah, that too.
So I can't alpha strike everything and remove an entire pod at once. Like, I literally don't have the action economy. So I do have the cannon fodder units start stacking up against me, and if I leave 4 troopers alive, I know I can one-shot them, but I've got 4 troopers alive, and that's 4 shots that Xcom need to soak and take in. And I think that's probably a different
with energy shield overhaul, and shield bearers are the bane of my existence.
Yeah. So yeah, enemies are definitely a weird thing to try and get balanced for.
Plus, besides, I think another important point in terms of quote unquote cannon fodder is, and maybe this is more apparent to me with vanilla classes than with Amalgamation or PCP, is that, for example, for my campaigns are very ranger for like loaded, like they're my highest killers, and I really depend on them. And the reason is because I also play with a lot of with the mod adds a lot of enemies to the map. I need these cannon fodders, these enemies that I can one-shot kill sometimes, just so that I can get the untouchable, just so that I can survive, because I know I'm going to get shot 8 times, and if I can just make that one of the 8 not do enemy damage, I might survive.
Yep.
So I think it's also important to have these cannon fodder enemies present sprinkled among the tougher ones.
Well, yeah, and Reshi has been commenting in the discussion as well that it really is a scale perspective. She points out that it's around a baseline of the power level of your classes as compared to the power level of the enemies. Of whenever you're, because if you think about it in terms of a ratio of your enemies are only doing X damage per shot, and your soldiers only have like 2x health, that ratio is completely different than you're doing X damage with your shots, but your soldiers have 4x health and 3 armor pits. Yeah, suddenly it goes from only needing 2 to 3 shots to now needing 7 to 8 shots, at which point then you become super soldiers.
It's a case of amalgamation. The amalgamation classes that we were using ended up outscaling
Yeah, and to be fair, we did sort of expect that when we said, well, let's just throw in everything for Amalgamation and see what happens.
Yeah. Also the Brigadier rank, like an extra one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, true.
Kind of forgot that Amalgamation has the Brigadier rank and XP changes that takes and requires, because I've never liked the Brigadier rank in Long War when it was introduced. It makes things too long, and you get too many perks.
Yeah.
And snowbally, and it's one thing I'm not liking about Amalgamation in my playthrough, and I know next campaign for me is probably going to be Iridar's vanilla classes redux.
Well, yeah, we are going to have an entire section on Amalgamation, and it'll touch on all that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, Reshi's throwing out some math in the chat here, and she's making very good points of kind of what I was commenting on about the scaling of a pod of troopers and stun lancers doing 6 to 8 damage per attack against a single soldier with 20 HP sounds pretty good, but if you start adding in 6 soldiers with 20 HP each and armor, and it just, now that pod literally can't even kill a soldier even if you just stood there and did nothing. So the balancing of enemy units, we definitely need to do a better job of comparing what our XCOM soldiers are going to be looking like when we're talking about later game balancing. Early game balancing is easy because your soldiers have almost nothing and they're all pretty much baseline stats. It's that late game balancing where suddenly the class creep has exploded in your stats and then your equipment bonuses on top of it. So yeah, we definitely will need to do a better job of kind of exploring of actually analyzing how we want to do it if we want to try and avoid that late game grind, if you will, where it gets that lower viewer engagement because it feels like every single fight is just going to be a breeze and people start kind of checking out, tuning out.
Yeah. And we also need to keep in mind the flip side of that, whereas if every encounter is the crunchiest thing and every single decision matters, then you get into this like analysis paralysis thing where every mission takes 2 hours because because it has to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but a lot of this does come down to just the way that we are getting all of these crazy perks in Amalgamation. And I just want to be clear, like, I say the word, this is an issue because of Amalgamation, which sounds negative, but like Amalgamation, in my opinion, was really fun. It was a great experiment. It created a lot of unique soldier builds, gave us some pretty OP broken stuff. But it was fun and it was enjoyable. And I think that most viewers would agree with that, that was a part of why people kept watching, because it was just so much craziness that was coming from every promotion. It was cool. It was fun.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Rusty.
No, I was just going to say, having amalgamation classes and the locked non-viewable skill trees for the end, definitely was fun.
Yeah.
And it was a nice diversion from a standard class pack system.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
And just nice to highlight it, like as an option that exists out there, that you can play this style with classes that I can't think of the right words, that aren't set like Amalgamation did a very good job of diversifying the barracks, other than the Sentinel tree being a busted, overpowered, and constant pick.
Yep.
So, continuing on the discussion of kind of the enemies in general, I know we've talked about a lot of the Requiem units and how you like them. Is there anything specific about Requiem that you would like to comment on, Odd, after having played against them, or things that you didn't like about Requiem?
I mean, besides the fact that they were responsible for most of the deaths, no.
Touch on corrosion.
Yeah, so I've got some notes written down about Requiem stuff, so I'm just going to walk through those. There's 3 things specifically that I liked from like an engagement standpoint, a tactical engagement standpoint with Requiem units. Number 1, the scamper or the reaction abilities that they would have. That was super fun to plan around, and I liked how some of them had counters, and you could come up with ways to prevent those reactions from happening. Some of them did not. But it was just a great system that I felt like wasn't overly punishing, and it was just the right amount of kind of puzzling to make those units really dynamic and engaging and fun. I like that certain Requiem unit types had weaknesses, like the Taipan, weak to fire, the Archon units, weak to poison. That kind of stuff was great because it dictated a little bit more of your squad management and loadout choices. And so that making that something you had to consider was really fun, and I think was done in a not overly heavy-handed way. I think this is something that I didn't pay as much attention to until like the biggest Requiem units came out, but those squad bonuses that each of the units would have, where it's like, okay, in the initial pod that they're with, if any of those guys are left alive, there's going to be all these stacking bonuses. Like early on, that wasn't as big of an impact, but later when you've got what was it, like was it the Mechapeds or something to do with like stacking these crit chances that were just insane? Like that was cool. Like that's such a great mechanic that I feel like I don't think any other games do that. And like for Reshi to create that and implement it in such a clean, cool way was like, that's huge props in my opinion. the last thing, and this is what you guys just touched on, was the corrosion thing. So love the corrosion as an idea. Love that it gets rid of armor. Really love that there's a campaign impact as well. There's like hey, your guy is getting corrosive hits all the time, and now they're like max corrosion, and you've got these other problems. What I didn't love about that at first was the lack of understanding of it. That's maybe just a me thing, but I didn't know that like there were these stacking levels of corrosion, and then Rusty whipped up that mod to be able to see it. That was really helpful, because then I was like, okay, cool. Now I understand where my people are at. And it's probably, I won't speak for Reshi, but I assume that was by design, as like, you just got to figure this out and don't be dumb. So that was cool. Honestly, not a lot of critiques. Everything's generally positive from the Requiem side for me. So.
Okay, so Wolfson brought up that we're about 2 hours in. So to kind of close out the enemy discussions, anybody have any thoughts around the Lost or Chosen? I figured we'd do Exalt as the last of the enemy things, and then jump into soldier classes and all the scariness there is.
If I can, I think I could probably summarize what most people are going to say. Lost are brutal. They're boring. We need to either come up with creative ways to buff them, but I don't want to. I would be against just giving them.
I'm working on an overhaul.
Okay, sick.
Yeah, they Lost really need an overhaul.
They really do. Yeah,
get the boot.
Yeah, because just giving them more health, who cares? They need like more interesting mechanics, kind of like what Reshi's done with Requiem stuff. Like if we had more things like that, okay, then all of a sudden Lost are cool again. But yeah, right now they're just kind of in a bad spot.
Just a sort of a high level sort of plan for this overhaul, high level concept, is Lost versions of other unit types. So Lost Berserkers.
Yep.
Lost Purifiers that explode.
Yep.
And trail fire. Stuff like that. Even Exalt. Lost Exalt. So Exalt with guns. So
great
all
idea.
Stuff like that. And yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to need a lot of help with. I've reached out to people on Meme already. Sort of at the moment, it's very much still in the concept stage, but yeah, that's the. I'm running a very, very early work in progress version currently on my own stream campaign, where the base Lost are basically the higher HP Lost are earlier, but you've got a lot less of them. So they don't impact performance as much, but you can't one-shot them. Or it's a lot harder to one-shot them. So it's definitely improved the balance, even just that. So long term, if I can get this working and produced, it should really shake up Lost and actually make them a threat. And is the idea.
Okay, and moving on to the Chosen. As we see, Odd's kind of stepped away, but Reshi mentioned that for the Chosen, we were using a better Chosen, and then that mixed with some of the other Chosen mods that we put in there, they seem to actually conflict with each other. So what did other folks think of kind of the Chosen, aside from the maps for Chosen Chambers that Reshi did, which, I mean, the hedge maze was amazing.
I mean,
but the actual Chosen themselves. What do people kind of think about?
I thought, I mean, from what I saw, and again, just to reiterate, I kind of like bounced a little bit during the early to mid campaign, but came back for like the last big chunk. To me, the Chosen seemed well adjusted. Like, for example, to me, the biggest reason why both the Chosen and the Rulers are such threats are because they hit you, they go for you, and they hit you while you're also facing other units. So it's not the same thing to face 8 troopers than 8 troopers and the Archon King or the Warlock. when they are by themselves, I think they're just whatever. You just focus fire them and you kill them in one turn. So I think that, making them aggressive, making them target you, attack you at the beginning of the mission, not having to wait until you see them to be activated, doing stuff like that is the kind of stuff that I think elevates the threat of who they are. Like, for example, Rusty and myself and Cloyster, we've talked about this a lot, but like, for example, something that would be insanely cool for the warlock would be for him to have the exchange ability. And whenever he spawns in, he exchanges with one of your soldiers at the start of the mission, and suddenly one of your soldiers is alone at the back of the mission. It's stuff like that make them more aggressive, because by themselves they're not great. So anything that can make them hit you while you're also engage with other pods, I think that's a net positive, personally.
So we do need to work on making them more dynamic. And I know Reshi has some secret sauce stuff that she's brewing, but
I'm scared.
So hopefully that will make them a lot more exciting. But we are running a little late on time. So the last major block, Amalgamation, Mach X captures, soldier classes, stat pumping, let's throw it at the wall. We've been talking about, we're going to get to it eventually. Eventually is now here.
I think we've kind of touched a lot on Amalgamation, to be fair, just through other means. And I think we're all in agreement that while awesome, and this is no slight to Amalgamation at all, it's awesome, and there's so many different kind of plugins that you can use with this. Just the way that it's currently structured results in the best of the best perk trees going to the top. This is maybe partly just my own personal play style. If I find something that's strong, I'm going to continue to use that, and if I find that on other soldiers, I will continue to choose that, unless we implement some type of arbitrary rules where it's like, well, you can't pick this because another soldier already has it, but then it defeats the purpose. Anyways, I feel like in future seasons, talking about what we would use, probably lean towards something a little bit more vanilla plus based, if that makes sense, like Proficiency or like Iridar's new class thing. I feel like that makes the most amount of sense to me.
Well, because one of the things that kept getting brought up is perk stacking, of the fact that the training center allows you to basically buy all three perk trees for a given soldier, which can lead to extreme power creep.
I think a question for you, Odd. Would you, after playing with Amalgamation, in particular, and it's very well picking the classes, if you didn't get the option to pick, if choose my class wasn't there and it was down to you're stuck with whatever was randomly rolled, do you think that would be a better way to experience Amalgamation?
That's a great point. And actually, yes, I think so. I think for Amalgamation specifically, having that as an option would have went a little bit more thematically with what Amalgamation provides. So yes, I personally think that would have been a good solution to that. Would it have been frustrating sometimes? Hell yeah, big time. But I think the pros would have outweighed the cons for sure.
Well, yeah, and also in Amalgamation, we kind of touched on this with the squad rotation and the fact that it introduced the Brigadier rank. And One of the big things that we didn't do is we didn't look into doing things like diverse aliens by force level to increase pod sizes in, say, the mid to late game, which would overall increase the XP pool that is given to it, or even looking at potentially changing the XP requirements of reaching Brigadier rank. How do you feel like the Brigadier rank impacted the overall gameplay cycle?
I mean, I think it's certainly skill tree specific. If you think about the Sentinel tree where you get, I can't remember the name of it now. Rapid reaction, was that what it was called? Yeah. Where it was like, after each Overwatch shot, you guarantee you take another one, and he does it 3 times or something. And then you stack that with Guardian, and you stack that with all the other crazy benefits of that tree. Like, yeah, it makes a significant impact. But the grind to get a soldier to that brigadier rank was like, well, it was long, man. It took a significant amount of time to get people there. I personally, if we think back to the earlier parts of the discussion where we are trying to do a campaign in 70 to 80 episodes and still have your maybe A, B, and C squads at that top rank, there's probably some work that we could do with like XP scaling. And then we just have to be mindful of how that's going to fit into force level progression and what enemies are going to show up. And, that's obviously a little bit of deeper discussion and work. But to me, just at a kind of high level view, I think that would be the approach that would keep things moving and feeling like we're getting people to those ranks that we want and still having a good challenge. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And one thing I think, looking at Amalgamation in general, I think on the plus side, it really did open up more variety in terms of the specs and the combinations that were available, that even as the season went along within, say, the same weapon type, there were a lot of different combinations. But because just sort of by design with that mod, there are so many more combinations, it did mean there was sort of a wider spread of potential outliers, including especially at the high end, and naturally you're going to focus on the ones that create the most powerful soldiers. So if, and I know this doesn't seem to be the way we're leaning, but if for a future season we kind of just took this base and tried to sort of trim the outliers back a little bit on each side, I think it would maybe make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think like that's where I'm really that's my biggest hesitation of going back to like a vanilla plus thing, is that okay, I've got my 6 classes and that's kind of what it is. I really loved the variety that was in there, and I'm okay having some soldiers be broken. That's kind of, in my opinion, that's what makes XCOM cool, is like you start a season, you've got some soldiers that are going to be duds, and like they can't all be superheroes, and some of them are going to roll exciting stuff that makes it they're going to be the gods of the season. Like that's kind of fun. So I am definitely more hesitant to scale it back so drastically where it's going to feel like monotonous, because from a viewer's perspective, I think one of the reasons that made this campaign so successful, just from a views perspective, is the variety. And that's a large part to do with Requiem, but I would say equally as large to do with the Amalgamation classes and just seeing what kind of broken, crazy stuff we were going to run into.
On the topic of variety, what do you think about the Mach X captures or the mech classes?
Mech classes I thought were pretty good. I feel like I would like to see the mech classes be a little bit more restrictive in what builds they have. So like, if I recall, they could equip any of the primary weapons. They could be a sniper with any perks. Like, I would like to see them a little bit more guided in that sense, in terms of what types of builds that they were allowed. For Mox stuff, I'm a huge fan of Mox or Exalt. Like I actually think from a threat perspective, there were times where they were really scary, especially when they whipped out their giant mech units. Like, I don't know if you guys thought that's where that sentence was going, but I was confused as well. But I thought that they provided a good level of threat at certain points in the campaign. And I love the idea of capturing those units. And I like that it's a gamble, and getting specifically the way that we had them set up this season, where they provided unique soldiers that were not part of Amalgamation. I thought that was great. I can see the downside of like, well, players submitted a soldier and now I'm taking a Mox unit that, yes, they also submitted, but it's not at the same detail or level. But I would make that same argument for why I don't like Sparks, because Sparks are, in my opinion, no personality. I much prefer making a Mec Trooper out of an existing soldier than just creating a Spark unit. That's my own personal preference. I know that's not the same as what everybody thinks, but that's kind of where I feel like all of this lands. So that's my thoughts.
I agree.
From capturing Mock-X units, can we touch on cybernetic gift farms? Do you feel he was actually okay?
Well, yeah, okay. So
personally, I loved having that, singular overpowered.
He allowed us so many things, so many get out of jail free cards. Like he could kind of single-handedly turn the tides of any mission that he was on. And that's fine. I think it's okay to have soldiers like that. And anytime that he was wounded or injured, I was like, oh man, like I gotta have a backup here. I gotta have another alternative plan. So I think that was fine. I don't know if we want to get into this or not, but I think like as awesome as PEX M is, which is the psionics overhaul that we're using with all the gem slots and stuff, as awesome as that is, I feel like it's a bit too strong in almost every department. And it's fun. That's the thing, is that everything about PEX M is super fun and very, it's implemented in such a cool way. But I feel like we could scale things back a little bit. Maybe that's just the choices of gems that we're using, or it's the number of slots that are available. Once I found gems that offered like the meta slots, the extra slot on the Psyamps, I would pick those like every time, because it's like, well, this is free. Why would I not pick this? So probably a little bit of work in that department to level that out. But huge, like I love those units. So I would not want to do away with PEX M. In my opinion, I would just want to kind of tweak what we're doing there.
On the flip side of the really strong units that we had created, we also this season definitely saw some units that didn't get much use. The Tesla Trooper, with the unique Tesla gun, and any user for the chem throwers didn't really much love. Is there any thoughts behind why that was?
I think the Tesla Trooper was a little bit too specific in nature. Like, first of all, like the primary purpose of that unit that I could gather was its branching shot. So it would hit something and bounce to other targets. That's great for maybe opening on a pod, but ambush is better. When you're fighting, when you're already engaged and you're taking away like arguably the strongest thing of a Tesla Trooper, which is starting an engagement against a pod that's not split up yet, enemies are never close enough where the arc gun could chain. And my experience is limited because every time I would take a Tesla Trooper out there, they felt like the weakest unit. So I started to bring them less and less. So I felt like that unit didn't shine as much as it probably could have. It could be just a mix of we're getting better rolls on other units, but I just felt like they were struggling.
That could just be like maybe a case with the weapon itself needs to have its arc range improved so that it has more chances to bounce to at least another unit when you shoot someone.
Yeah, possibly. I think it's like you could run the risk there of just trying to buff it just so that it's like, trying to do something that's not meant to do. Because how wide do you buff that? Do you make it 5 tiles, 6 tiles? And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden it's bouncing to every single unit. So it's a tough one. I'm not trying to naysay it or anything. It just doesn't stand out that well. I think the flamethrower units, I know that like Cloista is such a huge fan, and Rusty, you too. Like you guys are big fans of the flamethrower units, or chem throwers, I should say. Yeah, and it's cool. It's very likely that it's a playstyle thing, and for me, I'm much more of like, A, I want to alpha strike a pod. B, I want to stay as far away from enemies as possible. And C, I don't like putting my guys in danger. And so with the chem thrower stuff, I always felt like to be successful with them, I have to really risk a soldier. And I don't just mean they have to go from generally like a flanking position to be successful, but I have to get them pretty close to an enemy pod to be successful. And anytime I'm progressing close to an enemy pod, I run the risk of triggering another pod. And that's something that I, as a playstyle, try to avoid. So I just don't know if it's the best class for my personal playstyle. And that's not to say that the class is bad at all. It's just that it might be a mismatch for how I play.
Yeah,
They do require a lot more aggressive play, yeah.
Yeah, the chem throws really do require you to get up in people's faces.
Yeah.
Especially with like the arc cutter use, and then like the first time you used it was against the flying.
Yeah. I recall. Yeah,
couldn't get hit as well. It kind of soured the experience.
It was pretty funny. Yeah.
Shout out to Season 8 Toxic, who was a great chem thrower.
Hell yeah.
I think if you'd managed to find one of the hydro throwers, which do like freezing on enemies, you might have used them more. Because they're more of a defensive chem thrower.
Sure.
Also, to that point,
chem thrower, which would be more your playstyle. So maybe it's just a playstyle thing.
And also to kind of
Fear, sorry to interrupt. Just guys, thank you so much. I have to unfortunately leave early, but Odd, thank you, everybody. Thank you. I think season 9 and season 8 was a great success overall. Looking forward to our discussions for season 10, and much love to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the
Thanks,
podcast.
Kex. Really appreciate it, dude.
Thanks.
See you, Kex.
Bye.
You have a good day, Kex.
We're just so everyone's in the know, we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes.
So one of the things that I was going to comment on for the chem thrower and the Tesla rifle specifically is Odd had a couple very awkward soldier deaths around those classes that then caused them to fall off of the roster rotation.
Yeah.
And by the time he got replacements, it was a little too late.
Yeah.
So I think
that's fair.
Also impacted that piece.
That's a great point.
This kind of happened in season 7 with the Phalanx class as well. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. I think
the issue...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think the risk with chem throwers and lesser extent with Tesla rifles is that they fall in the same place that your assault class shotgunners and sword guys are.
Yeah.
Like, it's really dangerous for the close range classes because, you're close to their danger. And I think these seasons could maybe be do slightly better in making melee and other sort of close range classes more encouraging to use.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, that's less of a reflection of the class and more a reflection of my personal play style. That's just like Kex made the example earlier where he was saying, like, I rely on my assault units like almost exclusively in my campaigns, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I would love to see how you make that work, because I can't imagine running a bunch of assault or close range units or like chem thrower units against a legate. Like, I don't know what you have to do there. I feel like you're dead, but I could be wrong.
Could be interesting to see next time.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have actually thought of my points now.
Sure. Please.
Go for it.
Don't have anything else right now?
Go for it.
You basically have to have a way for that unit to get out, or have a way for them to have something like untouchable.
Oh, yeah, to be more confident with it. Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Nee.
About the rules document, first and foremost, I think that I'm quite happy with the way it's laid out at the moment. Like with, I think footnotes were a good addition to reduce the overall chunkiness of each question, and to really drive home the points that are important. Although I do find that it's a constant struggle to not bloat the document too much, that people lose interest, but you want to have, of course, as much information as possible.
Just for those maybe not sure what Nee is covering right now, she's talking about the character submission guidelines document that she created to make submitting the characters like as clear as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we go through new iterations of it every season.
Mm-hmm.
And there's constant new additions when new issues pop up and stuff like that. But I think the addition of FAQ will, like for frequently asked questions, have actually made an impact on reducing a lot of the common questions, and that we can just refer to there. Actually,
yeah, I would agree. Does anybody else have anything to add?
No, I think having a good living document like that is amazing.
Yeah.
And especially since you had to recreate it after Google Drive ate the old one.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it randomly just killed all my Xcom documents. I don't know why.
That's weird. It's Advent.
Anyway, and then I also have, of course, about the bot, which I do find it was really helpful.
Good.
In helping us with the first selection, basically, of bin files. And I think that both Cass and Foster had some ideas on how they could, of course, expand it for further future seasons and add more functionalities. But yeah, I really did find that helpful. And it saved a lot of time and stuff, especially the automatic messages that were sent out to people that got X'd. But what are your thoughts on when we added those additional like tags for people, like to let them know what kind of issue their bin had?
I mean, I think it's fantastic. The work that they did with the bot, I think is all good stuff. I think anytime that you have viewer submissions, you open something to the general public. There's going to be a certain group of people that pay attention. There's going to be a certain group of people that don't. And I think people submitting quality soldiers that put time into considerations for how they look, writing up a good backstory, like people that are putting real time into it are going to be the ones that are more responsive to seeing, okay, how's my submission looking? What's getting flagged? What's not? Oh, okay, this was flagged. Let me take a look, right? And I think while helpful, it didn't do as good of a job at making people as a whole more proactive in reviewing their submission after they got a flag. Generally, at least from my understanding, you and Kex both had to spend quite a lot of time manually reaching out to people and explaining what the specific issue was. And some of that maybe just impossible to get covered from the auto flag system. And some of that is just a level of engagement that certain people have with their submissions over others.
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know how many hours I've spent discussing stuff with people about their submissions, and they do not like. I think the most I reviewed a single submission was 8 times before I sent them off to output because I'm done with I can't handle this anymore.
Yeah, and I think like there's something we could do around that where it's like, okay, if you if a soldier's getting submitted and you give them very specific things to fix and then they come back and it's not fixed and we have some type of like 2 or 3 strikes and it's like too bad because at some point it's not respectful of your time, right?
Yeah, and especially this is of course the priority here because those are automatic ad, but like at some point it's like you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm showing you screenshots of where your issues are, and I'm writing bullet points of each issue. If you can't see that or start arguing with me about it's not true or anything, I'm gonna lose my patience eventually.
Yeah, 100%. I think anything that we can do to smooth out that submissions and review process for you guys, like that's of top priority when it comes to that, because I think it's been made extremely clear, like the amount of work that you guys put in there behind the scenes it's insane. It's like in terms of raw hours, like you guys put in as much as I do making a campaign. So it's
easily right above 100 hours, I think.
Yeah, like that's a huge ask, right? So anything that we can do to smooth that out, we'll do
for those weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have to say, I really appreciated that we had the pool wrapped up before the season started. That was a huge relief. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hey, well, yeah, I think we might have had a full-blown riot if we had said we were doing a fresh pool for 9.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I would have quit.
I remember I was like, okay, somebody had asked like, oh, should we use a new pool or an old one? Immediately like, no, we're doing the old pool. We're not going through that again. There's no way. So I think
no.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here. If there's anything I'm missing, feel free. But I think for season 10, it's 3 looks. It's your just your base level gear, and we keep the same like bio limit restriction that we had. And I think that we are maybe a little bit more strict on the number of revisions, so that we don't get into that situation where you have to give somebody feedback 8 times, because that's not cool. And I think that makes the whole process a little bit smoother.
Yeah, and I think if we have like more of an official decision on that, like when is it fine for us to just cut them off, even if they have paid for it?
Yeah.
Or if we take it up with you privately or something.
No, I think between you, Kex, and I, we write that into the document, make it extremely clear up front, like, hey, this is how it's going to work. Then I think we don't have any arbitrary kind of issues there, and it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. But a lot of these issues, of course, stem from the fact that it was 7 armors. It gives people more like risk of fucking something up somewhere.
Oh yeah, significantly more room to make mistakes. And to be fair, and like just to give some people credit, it is like you have so many cosmetics. There's so many issues in there, and I think you might have joined after we discussed this aspect. But one of the things that was brought up was we need to do a better job of vetting the cosmetics list to make sure that there's...
Yeah, that was next on my point.
Okay, yeah. To make sure that there's fewer issues,
there
right?
So many gaps. Like, it was crazy. That was like 90... No, well, at least like 80% of the issues were gaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we could do a better job there.
Yeah, I think we need to do more thorough testing of how different cosmetic modes interact with each other and can create potential issues. And
if we can start building up a whitelist of, we know these mods all play nice with each other.
Yeah,
we have that list is kind of recorded somewhere that's easily accessible for future seasons. We can then spend the time to say, okay, we know that this is a good starting point, and then look at other cosmetic packs and be like, hey, does this play nice with our whitelist? And if the answer is yes, then it can be added to the whitelist. And I think that might be something worth investing in the future too.
If I may, I think that the approach that I personally would like to take with this is have Nee and Kex just really like own this entire process, and their rules are kind of what goes. And I think like just their knowledge of which cosmetic packs work together is going to be really helpful there. And I think I would say Deadput as well probably has a lot to be able to add to that. But just having like a much smaller team of people responsible for which cosmetics we're using, I think would alleviate a lot of like, oh yeah, but I think this cosmetic pack is cool, and somebody else says this cosmetic pack is cool, and we're kind of throwing it all in there. Leaving that to a few people would make that a little bit simpler. That's my opinion.
I think one other thing that might be useful is, you mentioned kind of the whitelist of mods that play well together. I've found there also seem to be certain individual customization options, certain gear choices that tend to cover up a lot of the problem areas, like the shoulders, the waist, that sort of thing. Like I remember one time I discovered, hey, that the EW Covert Ops jacket that's in one of the packs is really great at covering up a lot of potential clipping or gap issues up at the shoulder, so it's a really useful piece. Just so that people know, oh, if you're having an issue with this combination, this might be a way to deal with it.
Yeah, great idea. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Nee, in that rules document that you've whipped up, are there any screenshots in there of like, when you describe an issue, this is what it looks like?
We should probably add, or at least links to.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be helpful. Is like, if you're getting flagged for gaps, here's some examples to look for. Here's some common, some more of the common issues.
The big thing that really helped me was the bringing to my attention that if you change attitudes, it will help expose those.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at all.
Was actually told to me. I didn't even think
add a point about that.
Yeah.
Like during the season, we added I don't know if it was an FAQ point or a actual rule, but like it was a rule to actually like remember to turn your character around and like look from it from all angles and in different attitudes, because that helps catch a lot of the issues.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to add on the character pool side?
Just mainly like I want to say to the community that I do really love doing this for you all of you, and I love like reading all the backstories and seeing all the different characters. I love that inside information and like being a part of picking who gets to be showcased, basically. I just would really like if people could maybe be a bit more like if we let you know about an issue, it's not a personal attack on you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
We try to really help you get there. And usually it's like we're willing to work with you as long as, you're also respectful to us and our time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anytime you're dealing with this kind of stuff online, people kind of feel that they can say anything without any repercussions, and I get it, free speech and all that, but also everybody in this room is doing this because they love a game, and like we all have the same passion for a certain game, and the amount of work that people put into that needs to be valued, and it needs to be respected, in my opinion. So yeah, I would echo that too, is like going forward, any type of like outbursts towards Nee and Kex for this work they're doing is like it's not acceptable, and we'll handle it accordingly.
Okay, so I'm going to remind you that the time is pretty much there.
Yep.
So what kind of final thoughts you have?
I start to get going.
Yeah.
It was fun being here though. So see you guys later on.
Yeah. I think like as a whole, like I'll echo what I said at the beginning, is like I'm so appreciative of the work that you guys put into this, because it really, I mean, I literally couldn't do this without you guys, and you're all really good at specific things, and I just would be so lost. It just wouldn't even be what it is. I probably wouldn't even be making XCOM seasons with user submitted soldiers. Even they would just be too overwhelming, and I couldn't do it. So I'm just so appreciative of everybody in this room. So thank you. From a campaign wrap up perspective, I thought season 9 was probably the best season of XCOM that we've ever had. For as much as we've dissected some of the problems, so much of it was positive, and so much of it was really fun and engaging and enjoyable. And I didn't get burned out playing it. I was frustrated just the right amount. I was feeling rewarded just the right amount. I felt the right amount of challenge for most of the campaign. XCOM, I can't think of a season that will ever happen where we don't go on periods where we're absolutely stomping. That is just how XCOM goes. And as much as we try to make sure every mission is like this nail biter thing, it's not ever gonna happen, and that's okay. We try to do our best to make sure that we are presenting a challenge, but it's also workable and doesn't feel insurmountable. And that's the biggest thing, is just making these campaigns something that I enjoy, something that everybody in this room enjoys creating. And I would think that everybody in this room would agree the most important thing is that everybody out there that's watching is enjoying it consistently, because that's kind of the fruits of the work of everybody in here. And I think that's our ultimate goal, is to put together something that is challenging, engaging, not frustrating, but most of all just enjoyable. Because at the end of the day, we're making these for videos. that people are watching, and we want you to enjoy watching them and have fun watching them. So yeah, I think that's it. That's it for me. I don't know if anybody has any final thoughts.
Well, we all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, Odd. You know.
I don't. No, that's not true. You guys would be doing this. You guys would be doing this because you love it and you'd be making mods. And I don't accept. I don't accept that. But I am lucky that you guys are here in the community, and I would be able to call each of you guys friends based on the amount of work that and dialogue that we've had around these campaigns in the past few years. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Definitely got to say, if it wasn't for original Xcom EU Season 1 way back when, I wouldn't be modding this game. So
that's awesome, man. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I have to say, I probably wouldn't be streaming Xcom as well as modding it if it wasn't for you.
I'm sorry for all the time you've lost.
Well, and you know, we're not doing this altruistically. I know for me, putting my time and effort into helping you with this means that I get to enjoy watching you play the game and curb stomping all the challenges we try to throw your way. So
I think one of the things a lot of people don't tend to realize, especially, and this isn't so much for the campaign, or it's more based around actually just modding the game. Like all of us here that are making the mods for the game, we do this out of our own free time for our own like voluntary reasons because we want to do these things. And at some point, like we can be really personally attacked sometimes on Discords, on streams, on Steam comments. And I kind of want to point out that we're all human as well. You know, we do it for the fun and enjoyment of doing it and to share that fun and enjoyment with other people. I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry.
But Rusty, I'll kind of echo that sentiment of you are absolutely right that the mods that we bring to the table that Odd gets to showcase, we do it for the love of the game, and it is perfectly wonderful if the community comes back with feedback around their thoughts about a certain balance or choice that was made that went into the mod. I think people need to remember that it is a creative endeavor, and if all you try to do is bring negativity to the conversation, all that's going to do is spoil the conversation. So we're creative. We love feedback. We want people to give us feedback because that means that people are interested in our ideas and we can make it better. But come with a modicum of respect. I think that's a good ask.
Yeah, I think if I can, I think that's a great point. And as somebody that's kind of put their work online for 10 years, it's very easy to get caught up in any type of negative feedback that comes in. And I would encourage, and this I'm talking to myself when I say this out loud too, I would encourage us to realize that so many of the negative feedback or comments that come in are from a very, very vocal minority. Emphasis on minority. Like if you look at the number of people that watch these videos compared to the number of people that say something negative to you about one of your mods or something, it is minuscule. And the amount of people that are using it and just thoroughly enjoying it are way outweighing that. But generally, people aren't coming to any type of internet forum or Discord or comment section to be like, hey, I'm playing with this mod. It works great. You know, you generally are only hearing critical feedback. So you guys are generally, by a long shot, appreciated in the community for sure. Guys,
to kind of put that in perspective, with small stats on the mod list, the mod list has been approximately downloaded and subscribed to close to almost 9,000 times.
Jeez.
So
wow,
it is quite a large number of people that are quietly enjoying this content and all the effort that we put into it to craft a very clean, very stable experience. So
Very
I
cool.
definitely would love to agree with Odd's sentiment that there's a lot of people out there that love it but don't speak up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you, Odd, for having me around for now almost 8 years on this
A long
project.
8 years. Just kidding.
Yeah, it really is. And we've come a long way, I could say.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, for those that don't know, Nee met her partner through the channel essentially, and yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, and how you guys have 2 kids now?
Yes, 2 boys.
Yeah, so that's like super cool. And there's a few different situations like that because we've been doing this for such a long time. Like, you know, I feel like I've gotten to see your family develop over the past 8 years. It's wild. It's insane to me.
Yeah.
And thanks for being here and being part of it.
Yeah,
Wouldn't have it
truly
any other way.
grateful for being here as well. Like, I try my best to hide it, but you know, an old fan, yeah, meet your heroes type thing.
Yeah, well, now I'm a fan. I'm a fan of all the work that you guys do, so I really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for having a discussion. There's so many topics that we couldn't even get to covering just because we're all so passionate about all these little areas, but I think we had enough discussion to take away some things and make season 10 later in this year even better. I'm not going to announce any type of start dates or anything publicly, but the kind of general consensus is once a year for XCOM would be sick, and try to make it better every time. So that's our main goals for the next one, and hopefully we can deliver on that. So thanks guys for joining, and if you made it this far in the podcast /video, super cool. Thank you so much. Bye everybody.